Welcome, friend of stillness, to Buddhism Seeds, where every night is a journey back to yourself. It's precious that you are here in this very moment, perhaps after a long day, when your mind is still filled with echoes of the world, unfinished things, unanswered questions, emotions you don't quite know where to place. Tonight, you don't have to try to understand or do anything. Just listen. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from doing, but from letting go, when you allow the mind to sit down, to breathe, and simply be. The stories you're about to hear are not ordinary tales. They are timeless Zen parables breathed into life by masters who deeply understood the nature of the mind, those who knew that peace cannot be forced upon waves. One must simply become the still lake. Each story is a doorway, a passage from noise to silence, from resistance to understanding, from control to freedom. You'll hear of Zen masters, disciples, and seekers who once struggled within the storms of their own minds until in a single moment of awakening, they saw the truth. It is not by defeating thoughts that peace comes, but by seeing them clearly and letting them dissolve. That is the essence of Zen: no forcing, no fighting, just observing as if watching clouds drift across the sky of your own being. And as you listen, you may find reflections of yourself in these stories, a person learning to let go, to not know, to return to the present. Because only when we stop trying to control does the mind begin to rest. Breathe in slowly. Exhale deeply. Feel each breath as a warm stream washing away the fatigue of the day. Now let me tell you stories as light as incense smoke, yet powerful enough to move a lifetime of restlessness. They will carry you through the quiet landscapes of the mind, where the light of wisdom filters through each breath, and where every gentle smile in the dark becomes a lantern guiding you home to inner peace. And we will begin with a story about the nature of control and the wisdom of non-resistance. On a distant mountain slope, the last cherry blossoms softly fell onto the damp morning ground. The air was thin, like the breath of time. The temple bell had just faded, leaving only the sound of a stream trickling between stones. Zen Master Shinen sat quietly on the veranda, his calm eyes resting on the thin wisp of steam rising from a warm cup of tea. The scene was motionless yet alive, filled with the fragrance of rain-soaked earth and the warmth of tea in the morning air. At that moment, a man arrived from afar. His cloak was covered in dust, yet his posture still held authority. His eyes, though bright, carried the weariness of one who had wandered too far in search of himself. He was a governor, once powerful, once believing he could control the world, including his own mind. He bowed and sat before the master. In the silence of the mountains, his voice broke the stillness. Slow but tense, I have meditated for many years. Now I can suppress all wandering thoughts. My mind is completely empty. I believe I am close to enlightenment. The Zen master said nothing. He simply looked at the man with eyes gentle yet sharp as a mirror. And in those eyes, the governor suddenly saw himself a man straining to reach stillness. In the light filtering through the leaves, his fatigue was laid bare, exhaustion from fighting so long against his own thoughts. After a long silence, the master rose. Beside the veranda was a basin of clear rainwater. Floating on its surface was a dry gourd left over from that morning's cleaning. The master pointed to it and said softly, "Keep it submerged." The governor hesitated, then obeyed. With his strong hands, the same hands used to command, he pressed the gourd down to the bottom. It sank for a moment, then popped back up, splashing water everywhere. He pushed harder with more effort, but each time it bounced back even higher than before. The master watched quietly, then said, "This is your mind." The governor looked up, bewildered. The master continued, his voice deep but calm. "You believe you have stilled your mind. But what you've done is not peace. It's suppression. You're forcing your gourd of thoughts underwater. It may stay down briefly, but when your strength fades, it will rise again, stronger than ever." The man stayed silent, his hands dripping with water. A breeze rippled the surface, scattering sunlight into 1,000 reflections. The master pointed again. "See, when you stop pressing, the water settles on its own. When you stop controlling everything, naturally becomes still." The governor stared at the basin. For the first time in years, he saw his own reflection, not the powerful man, not the disciplined monk, but a person simply trying to make himself calm instead of allowing himself to be calm. He spoke softly, his voice trembling. "Master, then what is meditation, if not emptying the mind?" The master smiled. "Meditation is not about making the mind empty. It's about seeing everything that arises without being swept away." He paused, then continued. "When you block thoughts, you turn the mind into a battlefield. But when you observe them, you become the sky where clouds pass without leaving a trace." The words slowed time itself. The sound of the stream grew clearer. A final cherry blossom fell onto the water, spinning gently before drifting away as light as breath. The man watched, his eyes softening. In that instant, he understood. Stillness is not the absence of sound, but the absence of disturbance. The mind is empty, not because it's forced to be, but because it no longer clings. The master poured more tea, the scent filling the air like a whisper. When you stop trying to control the mind, you begin to live with it. When you stop fighting thoughts, they dissolve on their own like morning mist under sunlight. The governor sat for a long time. In his head, the noise of commands, plans, and fears slowly faded. He no longer tried to sit straight. He no longer counted breaths. He simply let himself drift with the sound of the stream, feeling the cool air on his skin. For the first time in years, he was no longer trying to meditate. He was simply present. On the veranda, the master's cup of tea still steamed. The gourd floated in the basin, but now the surface was as calm as glass. The master whispered, "When you stop trying, your mind becomes like this water. It doesn't need to be still. It already is." The man bowed deeply, not as a ruler, but as someone who had just discovered the relief of not having to control anymore. A new breeze passed through. A distant bell rang clear, long, soft, like a dream fading into dawn. He walked away lighter. Cherry petals fell on his shoulders as if welcoming a man who had finally set down the invisible weight he'd carried too long. And back on the veranda, Master Shinan closed his eyes. He knew a mind had just opened, not by advice, but by the light of realization. Like water once released from pressure, it naturally returns to peace. Like the human heart once released from control, it naturally returns to its inherent stillness. In Zen, there's a paradox that many beginners face. The harder you try to silence the mind, the noisier it becomes. Like a person rowing too hard against the current, The more they fight the waves, the more waves they create. Only by letting go of the oars does the boat begin to flow naturally. Many people meditate with eyes closed, trying desperately to push thoughts away. But they don't see that this effort is itself a form of attachment. Thoughts are like clouds, they come and go. When you try to chase them off, you only stir up more wind. According to the Buddha's teaching, all delusion arises from attachment to the self, the belief that I am thinking I must control. But thoughts are merely phenomena, like ripples on the surface of the sea. The ocean doesn't need to do anything for the waves to settle. It simply doesn't react. You cannot fall asleep by trying to sleep. Sleep, like meditation, happens when effort stops. When you lie down, your mind is full of noise plans, regrets, memories, fragments of the day, and you try to push them away. But the harder you try, the more awake you feel. The more you suppress, the stronger they rebound. Neuroscience calls this paradoxical intention. When you try to force yourself to sleep, the brain releases stress hormones that keep you alert. But when you simply watch your breath and allow thoughts to come and go like clouds, the nervous system shifts naturally into recovery. That's the doorway to deep sleep. Zen teaches the same. Don't be the controller of the mind, be the witness. When anger arises, don't suppress it. Just notice it's there. When sadness comes, don't force joy. Just recognize this is sadness. That pure awareness without resistance, that's awakening. In daily life, we often act like the governor, repressing everything. We hide pain. We swallow anger. We pretend to be strong. But those emotions don't disappear. They stay buried, waiting to resurface like the gourd. Spiritual maturity begins when we have the courage to sit and face the mind without pushing, without holding, just seeing. And when you look long enough, something miraculous happens. What once frightened you begins to lose its power. Try this tonight before you sleep. When thoughts arise about work, family mistakes, or vague fears, don't chase them away. Imagine each thought as a small gourd floating on water. Your task is not to sink them, but to watch them drift. Inhale. Exhale. That's all. You'll see some thoughts appear and fade quickly. Some return again and again, but eventually blur and vanish. If you don't cling, they have nowhere to anchor. When the mind stops struggling to sink, it naturally floats in stillness. In that moment, you are no longer someone trying to sleep. You are being welcomed by sleep itself. Just like meditation, peace doesn't come from effort. It comes from permission. The permission to simply rest. The Buddha taught that all suffering arises from attachment, even attachment to good intentions, to progress to the idea of achieving something in meditation. Zen is not conquest. Zen is release. When you release, life's natural energy begins to flow again. Like the breath, no one controls it, yet it moves. Like the stream outside, no one directs it, yet it finds the sea. And like the mind, once freed from control, it naturally shines. During sleep, your body heals cells, renew the mind, cleanses itself. But this only happens when you allow yourself to do nothing. Like the governor, only when he released the gourd did the water become calm, and he saw the truth. Stillness cannot be forced. So whenever you feel tired, anxious, or overthinking, remember that image, the gourd floating gently on the water, neither afraid to sink nor eager to rise. Let your mind be like that. Let go to be still. Be still to see clearly. see clearly, to be free. As your breath deepens, as your body softens, feel the small tide within you receding from the shore. That's your mind stopping its struggle. No one is holding the gourd now. No one is controlling anything. Only presence remains effortless, unresisting, unattached. And if a thought still drifts by, smile at it. Let it pass like a cloud across the sky, like a dream drifting by before sleep. Because when you no longer need to be in control, you are finally free. And that is when true stillness begins. Up next, we'll continue with a Zen story about a young monk, a candle, and the miraculous lesson of silence. On the high mountainside, the wind arrived early that night. Silver clouds drifted across the treetops like faint ribbons of silk, wrapping around a small temple hidden among ancient pines. The only light came from the meditation hall, where Master Daikin had just finished a session with his disciples. The silence was so deep that one could hear the wind seeping through the cracks in the doors, the soft crackle of candle wax on the wooden table, and even the slow, steady breath of the earth itself. In that stillness, a young novice stepped inside. His brown robe was damp with dew. His eyes were bright yet restless, holding that half-innocent, half-troubled gaze of youth. His name was Ren, a diligent and intelligent student, but one who struggled to sleep each night. During the day, he listened attentively to the sutras, memorizing every word his teacher spoke. Yet when darkness fell, waves rose in his mind, thoughts, memories, dreams, and fears taking turns to surface. Ren bowed deeply. "Master," he said softly, "how can I see the truth when my mind keeps trembling like water in the wind?" Master Daikin looked at him for a long moment. In that gaze, he saw both sincerity and the yearning familiar to every seeker, the longing to see the light and the paradox that the more one searches for it, the farther it drifts away. The master did not answer immediately. He stood and slowly walked to a small table where a candle flickered unsteadily in the breeze. Then, without a word, he blew it out. A thin wisp of smoke curled upward and faded into the dark. The room sank into silence. For a moment, Ren shivered. The light had vanished too quickly, leaving a vast emptiness behind. Darkness filled the room as though it could swallow the tiny world around him. The master's voice came light as wind. "Do you see the light?" Ren answered, his voice trembling. "No." "Master," Daikin spoke calmly, "the true light does not come from the candle, it comes from the moment the wind stops." The novice said nothing. The words seemed to fall into emptiness, yet their echo lingered deep within him. Outside, the wind continued to blow, though more gently now. And in that darkness, Ren began to sense something different. Even without light, everything still existed. The warmth in the air, the scent of old wood, the beat of his own heart. The darkness no longer felt frightening. It was quiet, deep, and within that stillness, his mind began to settle. The master said nothing more. He simply sat, listening to the disciples' breath becoming slow and even. In that darkness, another kind of light began to appear, a light that did not illuminate outward, but inward. After a while, the master lit the candle again. The small flame rose soft and golden. But Ren had changed. His face was calm as a still pond, his eyes no longer searching, as though he had just understood something that no amount of words could ever teach. Master Daikin nodded gently. You see, Ren, when you try to grasp the light, you stir the wind within. But when you stop, the light returns on its own. Ren bowed his head. Master, then the truth is not something I have to seek. Daikan replied. No. Truth does not hide anywhere. It is only your mind that keeps chasing the reflections of light. When the wind stops, the water naturally mirrors the sky. When the mind stops, you see what has always been there. Ren remained silent. The words were not merely teaching, they were a doorway just opened. He realized that all these years, he had believed enlightenment was something to achieve, something to see through effort. But it was the very effort itself that kept his mind unsettled. Stillness is not the result of striving, it is the consequence of letting go. Outside, the clouds began to part. Moonlight slipped through the cracks in the door, spilling across the wooden floor. At that moment, Ren noticed something remarkable. Darkness and light were never enemies. They were two sides of the same breath, just as within the human heart, both brightness and shadow coexist, teaching us to see more deeply. Master Daikan slowly lifted his teacup and poured another for Ren. When you no longer fear, the dark light ceases to be important. Both are simply expressions of awareness. Ren received the cup, his small hands trembling slightly. The steam of hot tea mingled with candle smoke, filling the room until it seemed to dissolve into mist. They sat together in silence. Only the wind outside had stopped, as if it too were listening. In that moment, Ren understood why the Master had said, "True light appears when the wind stops." It was not light of the eyes, but clarity of the heart. Not something to be seen, but a state where one no longer needs to see. When Ren bowed and left, the candle still burned, but its light seemed softer, deeper, as though a new flame had been kindled within him, not from oil, but from stillness itself. And in the meditation hall, Master Daikin smiled quietly. Outside, the mountain night continued, but in one soul the wind had ceased to blow. We often think that light is something that shines from outside, a piece of advice, a philosophy, a guide. But in Zen, true light does not come from adding more to see, it comes from stopping. Stopping the wind of distraction, the wind of analysis, the wind of comparison, the wind of desire. The human mind, when not yet calm, is like a candle in the wind. Even though the flame remains, it flickers and wavers, unable to illuminate anything clearly. The stronger the wind, the more unstable the light. Yet the moment the wind stops, without more oil, without a new candle, the flame naturally steadies. In modern life, we are much like Ren, chasing all kinds of outer lights, the light of knowledge, success, praise, and secrets to peace. But the more we chase, the farther we drift. We fail to see that the reason we don't feel peace is not because there is no light, but because the wind inside hasn't stopped. The wind of anxiety, the wind of regret, the wind of I must be this, I need to become that. And in that storm, we forget the candle is still burning. We only need to stop blowing. Many people say I try to meditate, but the more I sit, the noisier my mind becomes. That is not wrong. When you turn inward, the winds rise stronger at first, because for so long, you've been covering them with noise, with phones, with busyness, with endless distractions. Only when you sit still do you hear them clearly. But instead of fearing them, just sit, just listen to the wind. Don't blow against it, Don't try to silence it. Let it weaken on its own. In the Buddha's teaching, the mind has 3 states: restless, scattered, still concentrated, and luminous, insightful. But many people seek light before they have stillness. They want to see the truth while their mind still chases illusions. It's like trying to see the moon reflected on water. If the surface isn't calm, the moon cannot appear. When the mind becomes still, wisdom arises. Just as when the wind stops, light appears. This stopping is not emptiness or loss, it is the return to what is natural. In that moment, you don't need to try to understand, and yet you do. You don't need to seek, and yet you see. Modern science confirms this too. When a person enters a calm state through meditation, deep breathing, or simply sitting quietly and watching the sky, the brain shifts from beta waves activity, stress, to alpha and theta waves, relaxation, creativity, restoration. In that stillness, deeper neural connections awaken, allowing clearer insight. The stopping of wind that the Buddha taught is in essence the balance of the nervous system. Tonight, if you lie down and your mind still feels unsettled, remember the image of the candle and the wind. You don't need to extinguish the wind only to stop following it. Each time a thought blows through about the past, the future, or someone you miss, gently whisper within, "Wind, stop blowing." Then return to your breath. Breathe in. Feel your chest open. Breathe out. Let the tension dissolve. Repeat this a few times. You'll begin to notice, as Ren did in the darkness, a soft light slowly emerging, the light of awareness. When you are still, you see. When you see, you understand. And when you understand, you fall into deep, effortless sleep. Let your body rest. Let your mind rest. Darkness is no longer frightening when you realize the light never left it, only waits for the inner wind to stop. Ren's lesson is not only for monks. It's for all of us living in an age of constant noise. Every day we are surrounded by winds, news, arguments, comparisons, predictions. The more wind, the weaker our inner flame. That's why sometimes the most powerful practice is not to add more, but to subtract. Spend a few minutes each day turning off your devices, your lights, even the voices in your head. Just sit still. At first you'll feel uneasy, but gradually you'll sense something profoundly safe, real and close, like Ren, who found the light not in the candle, but in the darkness itself. The Buddha said, "One who knows how to stop will see clearly. One who never stops, no matter how far he travels, will never arrive." To stop here does not mean to give up. It means to return. To stop is to let the mind breathe, to see that even in darkness, there is the light of wisdom. And if you listen even more deeply, you'll realize this teaching does more than help you sleep. It helps you live. When you're no longer swept away by emotional winds, you begin to hear the smallest things, the beating of your heart, the rise and fall of your breath, life unfolding completely in this moment. That is meditation, not distant, not mystical, simply being present long enough to notice what is already here. Remember, light doesn't disappear when night falls. It only moves inward, and those who are still enough will see it. Now, as you close your eyes, let your thoughts drift away like smoke. Let your emotions return to their rightful place. Let your breath carry you gently into sleep, where the mind no longer divides, and every wind has come to rest. Because when you are silent, you shine, and when you shine, even the darkness becomes tender. Now let us descend into the valley where the sound of the stream flows, and nature itself becomes the greatest teacher. That early morning mist still draped across the mountain peaks like a sheet of silver silk. The air was so still, it felt as if all of nature was breathing and meditating together. The temple courtyard was veiled in dew. Drops gathered on banana leaves and fell onto the damp ground, sounding as gentle as the whisper of the earth and sky. The faint scent of incense drifted in the breeze, blending with the smell of soil after a night's rain, making time itself seem to stop. Zen Master Dogen sat on the veranda, his gaze resting on the misty valley below. A small stream wound its way around rocks, its water murmuring softly, mingling with the sound of wind brushing through the pine forest and the distant songs of birds in the fog. All these sounds blended into a tranquil symphony, a music only those who are silent within can truly hear. At that time, a young novice named Roku was fetching water. He was intelligent, eager to learn, and devoted to his practice. Yet deep down, something unsettled him. Even though he read the sutras, listened to teachings, and meditated every day, he still felt he hadn't truly understood anything. During meditation, instead of stillness, his mind filled with noise, not from outside, but from endless inner questions. Am I doing this right? Why isn't my mind calm? When will I awaken like the masters? These questions repeated endlessly, turning stillness into a battle. That morning, as Roku walked down to the stream, those same thoughts lingered in his head. The mountain wind blew strongly after the night's rain, rustling the leaves. The stream flowed faster than usual. Its sound was no longer just a gentle murmur, it echoed, reverberated, striking the rocks and spreading across the slopes like the deep, resonant song of the earth itself. Roku stopped walking. He stood silently by the stream, bucket in hand, but his eyes no longer focused on anything specific. The more he listened to the stream, the deeper the sound became, as if countless layers of resonance rose from the mountain's core, from the rain, from the wind, from within his own chest. A strange feeling washed over him. The sound was no longer outside. It was flowing inside his very mind. Roku forgot he had come to fetch water. He simply stood there, letting the sound fill his entire being, as if the stream were carrying away all his questions, all his efforts, all his striving to understand. In that moment, everything became transparent. When he returned to the temple, the sun had already risen. Light pierced through the mist, scattering into threads of golden dust. He stepped into the meditation hall and bowed deeply before Zen Master Dogen. "Master," he said softly this morning as I went to fetch water, I heard the stream singing. And in that moment, I felt as if the Dharma itself was speaking. Dogen looked at him. His eyes showed no surprise, only a calm, gentle depth, like the surface of a still lake. "Yes, Roku," the master said. "When your mind is still, everything teaches the Dharma." The words were light, yet they rang in Roku's heart, like a bell echoing through the mountains. He stood silently. Something inside him seemed to collapse, not in destruction, but in release. All his old questions, when will I awaken? How close am I? What more must I do? Fell silent. There was nothing left to understand, nothing left to hold, only the sound of the stream flowing. He looked outside. The stream was still there, still singing, but now he could hear more. Within the sound of water was the sound of rain, of wind, of leaves, of time, and of his own heart. Master Dogen smiled gently, as if he had known this all along. When you stop searching, you become what you seek. Roku bowed his heart, light as air. He realized that enlightenment doesn't come from the effort to see, but from letting go of the need to see. It isn't about gaining something new, but recognizing what was never lost. Outside wind passed through the bamboo, creating a sound as tender as a lullaby. A final drop of dew fell from a banana leaf and melted into the moist soil. Roku sat beside his master quietly without another word. In that silence, he felt his heart merge with the sounds of all things. There was no longer a listener and a stream, only one endless flow of water, of breath, of life, of mind. And in that moment, he knew everything is preaching the Dharma, not through words, but through presence itself. There is nothing to understand, only to listen. Many who hear this story often ask, how can I also hear the Dharma in nature like Roku did? But in truth, the miracle doesn't lie in the sound of the stream. It lies in the mind that listens. In Buddhism, this state is called no self-mind anatta, when the subject and object are no longer separate, when the mind no longer divides me, and the sound of the stream, every sound becomes Dharma. Because Dharma does not come from words, but from life itself as it is. Think of the times you've been tired, anxious, or unable to sleep. When your mind is tense, even the sound of rain outside becomes noise. But when your mind is calm, that same rain becomes the gentlest lullaby. The sound hasn't changed, only the mind has. Just like Roku, the stream flowed as always, but that day he was still. In Zen, we do not create stillness. We recognize that nature is already still. Humans only need to step back, and that stillness reveals itself. For those who often lie awake through long nights, there is a simple breath-like reminder. If you cannot quiet the mind, let nature do it for you. Think for a moment, how long has it been since you last listened to the wind through the trees, watched the clouds drift, or touched cool water without rushing away? When you let nature speak, you are letting the Dharma speak through every form. Modern neuroscience also confirms this truth. Natural sounds, streams, rain, wind help the nervous system regulate itself, reducing activity in brain regions linked to stress. Our brains were born in nature, so each time we reconnect with it, the mind instinctively finds balance. But Buddhism goes further. Zen is not just about listening to a stream for relaxation. It is about seeing yourself in that stream. When you realize that the sound is not only entering your ears, but is also the rhythm in your blood, the breath in your lungs, the life pulsing through every cell, then you are no longer the listener. You are the listening. That is when nature becomes the teacher, and you become the nameless student, learning with your whole being. So how can you practice this in daily life? It's simple. When your mind feels restless, go outside. Even if it's just stepping onto your balcony, opening a window, or pausing beside a tree. Listen to any sound that is there. Wind, birds, even traffic. Do not name it. Do not judge it. Just listen. Don't try to listen clearly. Let the sound flow through like water passing by. Soon, you will realize it's not you who hears the sound, but the sound passing through you. If you practice this for a few minutes before sleep, your body will naturally reset its rhythm. Your heartbeat will slow, your breathing will deepen, and your brain waves will shift into the alpha state, just like Roku's mind by the stream. It's the moment when body and mind unite, and you fall into a natural sleep without effort. In the Buddha's teaching, he once said, "In the sound of birds, of wind, of water, the Dharma is spoken. But one can only hear it when the mind is still." That sentence holds a profound truth. The world doesn't need to speak, only you need to be silent. Just like Roku hearing the stream, it wasn't the water that changed, but his mind that stopped resisting. We often seek great truths in scriptures, philosophies, and teachings, yet sometimes the Dharma is already singing in the stream you pass by every day. If the mind is not still, every teaching becomes noise. If the mind is still, every noise becomes a teaching. You can try this tonight. Before sleep, resist the urge to reach for your phone or music. Just lie quietly and listen to the wind outside, the fan's hum, or your own breath. Don't label it pleasant or unpleasant. Simply notice that it is. Then gently release each layer of thought, the unfinished tasks, the fears, the plans for tomorrow. Like Roku, let the inner stream be heard and felt. When you listen deeply enough, you'll realize the sound of water outside and the beating of your heart are one. When you understand this, you will no longer fear loneliness, because you'll know you have never been separate from nature. The trees, the stream, the wind, the rain, all are breathing with you. Each night's sleep is not just your own, but the rest of all things within the great breath of the earth. And when morning comes, open your window and listen to the world once more. The sound of cars, of people, of falling leaves, all can be Dharma if your mind is still enough. The lesson Roku received is the lesson for all practitioners. Nature not only sustains the body, it teaches the mind. Let the trees, the water, the wind, and the stones become your silent teachers. For when you learn to listen to them, you are also learning to listen to yourself. Now, loosen your shoulders. Relax your hands. Let your breath grow softer. Imagine standing beside a small stream, cool water flowing over your feet. Listen to the sound of the water as if it's whispering something, not to you, but as you. In that quiet, you can hear the Dharma speaking through the stream, through the breath, through the stillness around you. And when you are ready, we will continue to the next story, where a young weaver learns the lesson of letting go and patience. On the eastern mountainside, spring had just arrived. The first sunlight of the day filtered through the lush mulberry leaves, spreading a soft, silken glow across the valley. In a small house at the end of a dirt path, the spinning wheel hummed steadily, a sound both delicate and enduring, like the ancient rhythm of the earth's own breath. By the loom sat a young weaver named Ayao, bent over her work. Since childhood, she had been known in the region for her skillful hands, able to weave silk as fine as the morning mist. But this morning, her face was tense, her brows furrowed. Each time she pulled the thread, a sharp sound broke the rhythm snap another strand had torn. Ayao stopped trying to rejoin it, but the more she worked, the thinner and harder to control the threads became. Beads of sweat gathered on her forehead. She bit her lip, breathing quickly, and tried again. Moments later, snap, another thread broke. The harder she tried, the worse it became. The more she wanted perfection, the more her hands trembled. The familiar hum of the wheel had turned into the sound of failure. Clasping her hands tightly, she whispered, "Why is this happening?" Just then, Master Kosen, who had taught her weaving from the very beginning, passed by. He stopped at the doorway, quietly observing. Morning light streamed into the small room, falling upon the frustrated face of his young apprentice. His voice was calm, low and gentle as wind. "Ayao, what is it that's troubling you?" She looked up, her eyes glistening with distress. "The thread keeps breaking, Master. I want to weave a beautiful piece of silk, but the harder I try, the more tangled it becomes. I don't understand why." Kosen looked at her hands, once soft and graceful, now clenched so tightly that the knuckles had turned white. He stepped closer, placed his hand on the loom, and felt the tension in the threads. Then he spoke slowly. "When your hands tremble, the thread tightens. When your hands relax, the silk softens." Ayao froze. The words were as simple as breath, yet they struck deep within her. She whispered, voice trembling, "I only wanted to do it well, Master. I wanted the fabric to be perfect." Kosen smiled a kind smile, though his eyes carried a trace of sadness. "It is because you want it to be good that you lose what is good, Ayao." Then he picked up a broken thread and placed it in her hands. "Weave again, but this time don't worry whether it breaks or not." And he left, leaving her alone with the sound of the wheel and the whisper of wind. Ayao sat quietly for a long time. Each time a thread broke, her teacher's words echoed in her mind. "Because you want good, you lose good." At first, she still frowned, sighed, and tried to hold on. But gradually, she began to let go. She started again, this time more gently. When a thread snapped, she didn't frown anymore. She smiled. She tied it back slowly and continued weaving. And strangely enough, from that very moment, the thread stopped breaking. The strands, as thin as morning dew, slipped smoothly through her fingers. The wheel returned to its steady rhythm, as if even the loom itself could sense the change in the weaver's heart. Sunlight streamed through the window, falling on the cloth, taking shape, shimmering smooth, reflecting an entire spring sky within each silk thread. Days later, when the fabric was finished, Ayao brought it to her master. She laid it on the table and bowed deeply. Kosen gazed at the silk for a long while. Under the light, it seemed alive, every fiber breathed peace, and carried the quiet moment when the weaver had stopped struggling with herself. He nodded and smiled. "At last you've woven with a peaceful mind, not with a striving will." Ayao bowed again, tears falling silently, not of sorrow, but of realization. She had understood something greater than the art of weaving. Whatever is done with a letting go heart naturally becomes beautiful. That fabric later became her most celebrated work. People praised the technique, the fineness of the silk, the glow of its color. But only Ayao knew the true beauty came not from her hands, but from the moment she stopped trying to make it beautiful. Because only when we no longer seek perfection can perfection reveal itself. Ayao's story mirrors many of us, those who always want to do well, to be perfect, to control the outcome. Yet it is precisely that excessive effort that tightens the mind like an overstretched thread ready to snap. In Buddhist teaching, this is called attachment to results. When our minds fixate too strongly on the goal, we forget the path. When we desire success too much, we lose the joy of action. When we chase peace too eagerly, we become more restless than ever. The mind is like a loom. The tighter you grip it, the easier it breaks. Action is like thread. The faster you pull, the more it snaps. Zen teaches that right action does not arise from desire, but from presence. The weaver doesn't need to force the silk to be beautiful. She only needs to be fully with each thread, each motion of her hands. When the self no longer interferes, when only the doing remains, everything naturally falls into harmony. Many people meditate like Ayao weaves. They sit not to observe the mind, but to attain stillness to reach enlightenment. But that very wanting prevents stillness, just like Ayao, who lost good by wanting good. If you've ever lain in bed trying desperately to sleep, you know this truth. The harder you try, the further sleep drifts away. Because wanting to sleep is itself an effort, and effort always opposes relaxation. Science calls this paradoxical intention. The more we try to control, the more the nervous system tenses, cortisol rises, and rest becomes impossible. It's the same with the silk thread. When the hand grips too tightly, it breaks. When it releases gently, it joins. Your body works the same way. When relaxed, it heals itself. From the Buddhist view, attachment to results is a form of craving, tanha, the clinging to desire. As long as we cling, we suffer. When we release, wisdom naturally appears. The Buddha once said, "Without craving, there is no disappointment. Without holding, there is no loss." The mind, like the sky, allows all things to be complete. It sounds simple, yet to live it, we must practice little by little. Look at Ayao. She didn't suddenly awaken. She began with a smile in place of reaction. Each time the thread broke, she smiled and tied it again. That was all. Gradually, the threads broke less often, because that smile was the mark of a mind that had learned to release desire and return to the present. In the same way, you don't have to eliminate pressure or expectation in your life. Just notice them. Each time you see yourself trying too hard, smile. Smile like Ayao and continue, but a little lighter. If you practice this long enough, you'll notice something miraculous. The results often turn out better than when you were trying to force them. Because your energy is no longer tense, it flows naturally. Tonight, before you sleep, reflect on your day. What made you most tired? Was it something you wanted to do perfectly, but it didn't go as planned? If so, imagine it as a thread snapping in your hands. Don't blame yourself. Don't rush to fix it. Take a deep breath in, exhale, slowly smile, and tie it gently again. Relax your shoulders. Soften the furrow in your brow. Let your breathing slow just a little. That's all, and you'll see that even imperfection has its own kind of beauty. A psychologist once said, "Happy people aren't those who always succeed. They're those who can accept not succeeding." That is also the essence of Zen, welcoming things as they are. If you can work with that kind of mind, your sleep will change too. When the mind no longer demands, the body naturally rests. When you no longer want to sleep, you fall asleep. When you no longer want to be at peace, you truly are. Ayao's lesson is not just for those who weave. It's for anyone weaving their life each day. Every thought, every action, every word is a thread. Sometimes it breaks, sometimes it tangles. But what matters is not avoiding the break. It's knowing how to reconnect it with a peaceful heart. The most beautiful fabric is not the one without broken threads. It's the one mended through moments of letting go, understanding and smiling. In the same way, a beautiful life is not one without cracks. It's one where we can smile each time it breaks a little. So if something has made you tense today, a plan unfinished, a person who misunderstood, or a dream still incomplete, remember the young weaver by her loom. Each time the thread snapped, she smiled, rejoined it, and continued. And so can you. Each time something goes wrong, breathe, smile, and keep living. Let the natural current of life carry you. Don't resist it, because when the mind stops trying to be perfect, everything naturally becomes perfect. And now, as your breath evens out and the light in your room softens, feel that with every heartbeat you too are weaving the fabric of your own life. Each thread an experience, each knot a lesson, each smile a golden strand. The calmer the heart, the softer the thread. When you release the need for results, you'll see the quiet miracle. Everything naturally becomes beautiful. Next, we will move on to another story about the true value of the Buddha's mind, something that can neither be bought nor exchanged. Late afternoon. The wind from the pine forest swept across the old tiled roofs of the temple on the mountainside. It carried with it a faint scent of incense, mingling with the gentle clinking of wind chimes hanging by the gate. The whole space seemed to breathe slowly, deeply, as if even the air itself was whispering the Dharma. In the temple courtyard stood a stone lion statue, silent amidst moss and time. Its body was cloaked in the green of age, yet its half-closed eyes still radiated an unwavering gaze, both majestic and serene, as if guarding, as if meditating. No one knew when it was carved. They only knew that as seasons passed and years turned, the stillness on its face never faded. That day, as the sun was setting behind the distant mountains, a visitor named Minoru arrived at the temple. He had once been a scholar well-read in scriptures and fluent in philosophy. He believed that through knowledge alone he could reach enlightenment, but the more he learned, the more he felt something was missing. Within him grew a longing not for more understanding, but for true peace. He had visited many temples, listened to countless sermons, and met many teachers. Yet each time he returned home, his heart still felt empty, as if he had never heard anything at all. It seemed that the more he searched, the farther he drifted from what he sought. That evening, when he met Zen Master Shon Minoru, knelt down and bowed deeply. "Master," he said, "I've read the Lankavatara Sutra and the Vimalakirti Sutra. People say the mind is Buddha, but I don't understand. If the mind is Buddha, why is my mind still chaotic? Why am I still greedy, still fearful, still suffering?" Shun did not answer immediately. He looked at him, his eyes deep and still as a lake. After a moment, he stood and walked out to the veranda. Minoru followed. The golden light of sunset spread across the courtyard. The wind from the pines carried the scent of incense and damp earth. Below the steps, the stone lion stood in the amber glow, half in light, half in shadow. The reflection of the sun flickered on its surface, making it appear both alive and unmoving, a being suspended between two worlds. Shon pointed toward the statue and asked, "Do you see that lion? How much do you think it's worth?" The question startled Minoru. He didn't understand what the master meant, but replied, "Master, it's priceless. It's the temple's treasure. No one would dare buy it and no one would dare sell it. Shun smiled gently and nodded. Your mind is the same. Do not trade it for anything. That was all he said, but those few words echoed through Minoru's heart like a bell. All his ideas, his knowledge, his years of effort suddenly seemed small, almost meaningless. He stood motionless, unable to speak. And then he understood. All this time he had been seeking the Buddha outside himself in scriptures, in statues, in sermons, forgetting that the Buddha had never left his own mind. What he called chaos was only the surface waves of a still lake. Beneath them, the water remained clear and calm. He let out a soft laugh, a smile that was both light and wet with tears. In that moment, he no longer needed another teaching. The phrase, "the mind is Buddha," was no longer theory. It had become something seen. From that day on, Minoru stopped traveling in search of the way. Each morning, he simply sat in the temple courtyard before the stone lion. Wind blew, leaves fell, sunlight touched the statue. Sometimes rain covered it, or fog wrapped it in silence. Still, he sat there quietly. People in the temple said he had changed. His eyes looked gentler, his steps grew slower. But in truth, it wasn't that he had become something new. He had simply stopped trying to become. For only when one no longer strives to be a Buddha does one realize one already is. When one no longer fears the restless mind, the mind becomes still, and when one stops searching for light, light shines forth from within. Late in autumn, a visitor came to the temple and saw Minoru sweeping fallen leaves beneath the pines. They asked, "Do you now understand what it means that the mind is Buddha?" He smiled and pointed toward the stone lion glowing under the sunlight. "I don't understand anything, but every time I look at the statue, my heart feels at peace. And perhaps that's enough." In Zen it is said, "When the mind is still, all things are Buddha." It means truth is not somewhere outside. Only when our minds stop wavering can we see the true nature of everything clear, stainless, and priceless. Minoru once sought the Buddha in words, but the Buddha is not found in language. The Buddha resides in the very mind that sees. We are the same. Every day we trade our inner peace for fame, money, praise, affection. We sacrifice a pure heart for things that fade. And when they change, we suffer not because the world is impermanent, but because we exchanged the priceless for the temporary. The human mind is like a luminous gem. Even when buried in mud, it remains a gem. It only needs to be cleaned. Yet instead of cleaning it, we try to polish, decorate, and reshape it. And in trying to make it more beautiful, we lose its true beauty. Zen doesn't teach us to make the mind better. It helps us see that the mind is already complete. If you've ever felt empty, even when you have everything, know that this is the voice of your own inner gem. It's saying, "Stop trading me for small things." You can try something simple right now. Place your hand over your chest. Feel your heartbeat. Don't call it my heart. Just feel the pulse of life moving. That is the mind, the living, clear, and unconditioned presence within you. When you can touch that, you'll understand Master Shun's words. Your mind is the same. Do not trade it for anything. Modern neuroscience says that when people live in constant comparison and evaluation, when the mind is always looking outward for worth, the brain's stress centers, like the amygdala, become overactive, releasing cortisol and causing anxiety, insomnia, and fatigue. But when we stop seeking and simply observe the breath, the nervous system naturally shifts into recovery mode. The heartbeat slows, sleep deepens. This is no different from Zen's essence. Stop trading your mind for the world. When you stop, you realize you already have everything. The Buddha once said, "Whoever treasures their mind possesses the entire universe." A person who loses inner peace, even with great wealth, is poor. A person who keeps a calm mind, even with empty hands, is rich. Just like the stone lion, its value does not come from its material, but from what it represents. The strength of stillness, the power of remaining unmoved through storms. Your mind, if you know how to guard it, is the same. No matter how fierce the winds outside, it can remain upright, shining, and priceless within. In everyday life, we make countless exchanges with the world. Each time we become angry, we trade peace for anger. Each time we envy, we trade joy for suffering. Each time we insist on being right, we trade freedom for exhaustion. And then we wonder why we cannot see the Buddha. It's because the Buddha never needs to prove anything. The Buddha is the clear mind that sees everything without attachment. That mind is still within you. You only need to stop trading it away. Tonight, before you close your eyes, take a moment to reflect on your day. What did you trade your peace for? An argument? A harsh word? A fear? If so, take a deep breath in and exhale. Imagine yourself standing before the stone lion, gazing into its calm eyes. Let that stillness enter you. When the mind becomes quiet, everything around you quiets as well. Sleep will come softly, not because you forced it, but because you stopped trading your rest for restless thoughts. The lesson of Minoru is simple yet profound. Your mind is priceless. It is your Buddha nature, the source of all awareness. Just stop searching, stop comparing, stop trading, and that mind will shine by itself like the stone lion in the evening sun, needing no lamp, yet radiant. When you realize this, you will no longer fear loss. Because the only thing truly worth keeping, a peaceful mind, is already yours. And as your inner light softens into stillness, we will move on to the next story, where a small grain of salt in a bowl of water teaches us how to expand the heart and dissolve suffering. Morning in the valley. Dew still clung to the bamboo leaves, each drop glimmering like a tiny pearl. A small stream curved around the temple, its water trickling softly over moss-covered stones. The air was cool and so still that if you paused for a moment, you could hear the slow breathing of the earth itself. From afar, the temple bell echoed deep and long, dissolving into the mist, like a call for weary hearts to return and listen within. That morning, a farmer named Kenta stepped through the temple gate. He was thin, his shirt worn at the shoulders, his eyes deep and hollow from many sleepless nights. He knelt at the veranda, bowed low, and spoke to Zen Master Enso in a trembling, hoarse voice. "Master, I don't understand why my life is filled with so much suffering. I work hard. I treat people kindly. Yet everything still seems to go against me. I feel it's unfair. I feel tired. And sometimes I just wish to disappear." Master Enso was silent. He looked at the man before him, a face roughened by sun and wind. Yet behind the eyes was deep resentment and pain. After a while, he asked softly, "Where do you feel this suffering?" Kenta lifted his head and answered almost reflexively, Everywhere, Master. In my home, in my work, in my heart. It feels like wherever I go, suffering follows. Enso nodded, then rose to his feet. He gestured for Kenta to follow him, and they walked through the garden behind the temple. They moved in silence. Birdsong and the distant murmur of the stream seemed only to deepen the heaviness in the farmer's chest. They came to an old well. The water inside was crystal clear, reflecting the pale blue of the morning sky. Master Enso bent down, took a handful of salt from a small earthen jar beside the well, and handed it to Kenta. Put this salt into a cup of water and drink it. Kenta looked puzzled, but did as told. He stirred the salt into the cup, took a sip, and grimaced. "It's very salty, Master." Enso said nothing. He took another handful of salt and poured it into the well, then scooped a ladle of water and gave it to Kenta. "Now drink this." Kenta drank, then looked up surprised. "Master, this water isn't salty." Enso smiled gently, his eyes kind as the morning mist. "Your suffering is like this handful of salt. The salt remains the same, but the water changes. When the mind is small, it tastes bitter. When the mind is vast, it does not." Kenta stood still. The words weren't a long sermon, yet they sank deep like a drop of water reaching the driest place in his heart. A light breeze stirred the surface of the well, and in its rippling reflection, he saw his own face, and for the first time, he saw himself in silence. He understood all this time it wasn't life that made him suffer, but the small cup he had trapped himself in. He had crammed his losses, misunderstandings, and fears into the narrow space of his mind, so even a little became too much. From that day on, Kenta stopped complaining. When the harvest failed, he simply sighed and remembered the well. When his neighbor spoke harshly, he smiled to himself and whispered, "Make the mind bigger." Gradually, the people in the village noticed a change. He no longer lost his temper, no longer spoke of unfairness. He worked as hard as before, but there was something new in his eyes, a calmness born from no longer wrestling with life. They said that in time, he became respected not for wealth or status, but for his serenity. His presence was like a river once, just a cup of salty water now wide enough to hold stones, mud, and even the sky reflected within it. And every morning when he passed by the old well, the sound of water still trickled softly. He would pause, bow, and smile, as if greeting the man he once was. The story sounds simple, yet it holds a profound Zen truth. In life, everyone carries their own handful of salt, sadness, hurt, disappointment, mistakes. No one escapes it. The difference lies in the size of the mind that holds it. If the mind is narrow like a cup, even a little pain makes the water bitter. If the mind is vast like a well or like the sea, then the same salt cannot harm it. Buddhism calls this transforming the mind, not the circumstance, changing the vessel that holds the experience. A person suffers not because they have too much pain, but because their heart is too small to contain it. When we complain that life is unfair, it's because we are looking through a small lens. But when we widen the view, those injustices become only grains of salt in the vast ocean of causes and conditions. Modern psychology confirms this too. When we fixate on pain, the nervous system tightens. The brain releases cortisol, drawing us into a cycle of stress and negativity. But when we broaden our awareness, seeing things in a larger context, The brain releases oxytocin and serotonin chemicals that calm emotions and restore peace. In other words, expanding the mind is not only a Zen teaching, it's also a scientific way to heal. When you sit in meditation and listen to your breath, you are expanding your mind. When you forgive someone who hurt you, you are expanding your mind. When you take a step back instead of arguing, you are expanding your mind. And when you feel gratitude, even for adversity, you turn salt water into sweetness. If you're listening to these words, perhaps you too are holding a handful of salt, a broken relationship, an old wound, or something unfinished. I'm not telling you to throw it away. Keep it, but don't drink it from your small cup. Pour it into a larger well, the well of understanding, compassion, and perspective. Then, though the salt remains, it dissolves, becoming part of the flavor of life. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Make your mind vast like the earth. Whatever falls upon it, the earth does not suffer. The wise do not try to escape suffering. They grow a heart wide enough to contain it." So tonight, as you lie down, if worries return, don't force them away. Imagine each thought as a grain of salt falling gently. You cannot stop the salt, but you can widen the well by breathing deeply, slowly and softly releasing each thought. As you inhale, say quietly in your heart, "I am expanding my heart." As you exhale, all suffering is dissolving. Your body will respond. Your heartbeat will slow. Your breath will deepen, and your mind will no longer swirl inside a small cup. Let your breath be your well. The deeper you breathe, the wider it becomes, and as you drift into sleep, your suffering too will dissolve into that water. In life, we cannot choose how much salt falls into our path, sometimes more, sometimes less, but we can choose the size of our well. That is the greatest freedom Zen gives us, the freedom to expand the mind. A person with a small heart living only for themselves is hurt by every word and every glance. But one with a vast heart, no matter how much salt is thrown, keeps the sweetness of clear water. That is why gentle people always smile. Not because they have no pain, but because pain can no longer make their hearts bitter. So learn from Master Enso. Don't wish for life to have less salt. Make your heart as deep as the well. Remember, suffering doesn't need to lessen it, only needs to be held in a larger space. If you practice this each day, a few minutes of breathing, a few pauses before reacting, a few moments of softening before sleep, you'll notice your inner well widening, and what once made you bitter will only leave the faintest trace, perhaps even giving life a deeper taste. The lesson of the salt in the well is the lesson of compassion. Compassion doesn't mean not seeing suffering. It means seeing it and still smiling. When the heart grows wide, you no longer need to escape pain. You understand it as part of life, part of what helps you grow. The mind is like water. The wider it is, the clearer it becomes. Suffering is like salt. The more it dissolves, the less it tastes. And in that stillness, you realize that suffering never truly left you. It has only been teaching you how to widen the well of your own heart. Now let your breath become the clear water. Release all resistance. Relax your shoulders. Soften your forehead. Let your mind float through the night like a quiet lake reflecting a cloudless sky. For when the mind is vast, nothing is bitter anymore, only clarity and peace remain. And in this calm moment, we continue our journey to another story, where a humble straw hat teaches us how to let go of judgment and rediscover inner freedom. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the bamboo behind the temple, falling in soft golden streaks across the ground. The gentle wind stirred the wind chimes hanging by the veranda, their clear notes like grains of sand brushing together. The faint scent of incense from the Buddha hall mingled with the smell of dry grass, giving the air a sacred yet peaceful stillness. Everything was so quiet that one could almost hear the breath of the wind or the whisper of a falling leaf touching the earth. In that moment, a young novice named Ina was sweeping the courtyard. She worked quickly and evenly, the bamboo broom leaving smooth, circular trails across the mossy tiles. Ina was serious by nature. She always wanted to do everything well. She believed that spiritual practice was like sweeping the courtyard. The cleaner it became, the closer one was to a pure mind. While working, Ina noticed from afar a beggar approaching the temple gate. He wore tattered clothes, his bare feet covered in mud. On his head was a torn straw hat, frayed and weathered by time. His back was bent, and every step seemed heavier under the pale golden light of the late afternoon. The beggar stopped before the gate, bowed slightly, and spoke in a rough, tired voice. "Please, a little water to drink." Ina frowned. She paused her sweeping and looked him over from head to toe. In that brief moment, a sharp thought rose within her. Another lazy man living off others' kindness. Why can't they just work like everyone else? She turned away, intending to fetch some water, but her heart resisted. Her teacher, Zen master Gyoku, who had been nearby, saw everything. He didn't scold her. He simply asked softly, "Ina, what do you see when you look at that man?" She answered firmly, "I see a poor, dirty, lazy man." Gyoku nodded gently, a faint smile crossing his lips like a passing breeze. He spoke slowly. "You see a torn straw hat, but you do not see the sunlight." Ina furrowed her brow, puzzled. "The sunlight?" Master Gyoku stepped out onto the veranda and looked toward the beggar still standing in the sun. Pointing with his hand, he said calmly, "Look, that straw hat, though torn, is still shading him from the sun. Even broken, it fulfills its purpose. And the sunlight, it's still there, shining through the cracks in the straw, touching his shoulders, the ground, and his weary face. But you did not see it, because you stopped at the straw." He paused, his voice soft as the breeze. "People are the same. Beneath every layer of dust and every mistake, there is still a little light that lives on. Though covered, it never goes out." Ina lowered her head. Those words fell into her heart like a drop of warm water into dry earth. She looked again. The beggar was still standing quietly, holding his chipped bowl, waiting. The sunlight wrapped gently around his frail frame, forming a soft golden halo. And just as her master said, the light was still there, tender, steady, and untouched by the torn straw hat. Ina felt something soften inside. She hurried into the temple, filled a bowl of water, and brought it to him. When she handed him the bowl, she bowed low. He nodded faintly and drank slowly, sip by sip. In that moment, Ina saw his wrinkled, trembling hands and a trace of peace pass over his tired face. When the beggar left, Master Gyoku came beside her. His voice was light as breath. "Ina, whenever you feel the urge to judge someone, remember the light never disappears. It's only that you're looking with closed eyes." Ina said nothing. She just watched the dirt path where the beggar's figure slowly faded behind the bamboo grove. Inside her, something rang softly, perhaps the sound of the wind chime, or perhaps the sound of her own heart opening. From that day on, Ina never looked at people the same way. When she met someone unpleasant, she would ask herself, "Is there sunlight hidden behind this straw?" When she saw someone make a mistake, she smiled and thought, even in darkness, light is finding its way back. She still swept the courtyard every afternoon, but now, with each sweep of her broom, she was no longer trying to make things clean. She was learning to see more clearly what was already pure. The story seems small, but it can move an entire life. How often, like Ina, do we look at others only through judgment, forgetting the light behind their straw? When someone speaks harshly, we label them unkind. When someone fails, we call them weak. When someone succeeds, we assume they are lucky or fake. We forget that sunlight is still there, hidden beneath layers of karma, circumstance, and unseen wounds. The Buddha once said, "No one is entirely bad and no one is entirely good. We are all practitioners, each walking a different part of the path. Others may be passing through a dark bend, but their light hasn't gone out. We simply haven't looked deeply enough to see it." In Zen, judgment is seen as the root of ignorance. When we judge, we separate ourselves from others. We build a wall between me and them, and that very wall clouds our mind and shrinks our heart. Judging others is a sign of a small mind, a mind too narrow to hold the vastness of life. But when we release judgment, the heart becomes wide enough to see that everyone has reasons for their actions and that each person struggles with invisible pain we may never know. There's a Zen saying, "I love." When you see someone err, remember that you once walked that same road. And sometimes it is through them that we begin to see our own shadows more clearly. Modern psychology teaches the same truth. When we judge others, the brain releases adrenaline and cortisol stress hormones that activate the body's defense systems. But when we practice compassion and understanding, the brain produces oxytocin, the hormone of connection and peace. In other words, releasing judgment doesn't just give others space to breathe, it gives us rest too. Imagine each judgment as a small pebble falling into water. The more we judge, the more ripples disturb the surface. When we stop, the water becomes still, and then we can see the sunlight reflected, which is our own clear mind. Once a student came to a Zen master and said, "I can't meditate. My head is full of judgment. This person is foolish. That person is fake." The master asked, "Do you know what you judge most?" The student was silent. Then the master said, "You are judging yourself." Indeed, most judgments aimed outward come from rejection within. When we see someone boastful, it's because we fear our own inadequacy. When we see someone weak, it's because we haven't forgiven our own weakness. That's why the Buddha taught one who truly observes their own mind no longer sees faults in others. So how can we let go of judgment? First, observe it. Whenever you catch yourself frowning or thinking ill of someone, don't suppress it. Just recognize, this is judgment. Then take a deep breath in, exhale slowly, and whisper inwardly, "I see the straw, but I know the sunlight is still there." Just that is enough to shift the energy inside you. The tightness in your chest softens, the heart opens, and gradually, something miraculous happens. The person you once disliked no longer makes you suffer. Judgment is like gripping a thorn. The tighter you hold, the more it hurts. When you release it, you free both yourself and the other. If you're listening to this late at night, try a small practice. Close your eyes and think of the person who troubles you most. Now imagine them wearing a straw hat. Beneath that straw, sunlight still shines the light of their Buddha nature, their goodness not yet awakened. Take a deep breath in and softly exhale, whispering, "May I see the light in me and in others." Practicing this for a few minutes each day will begin to change your heart. You'll judge less and understand more. Science calls this mirror neuron resonance. When you look at others with kindness, their brains mirror that calmness back to you. In other words, when you stop judging, you're not just cultivating peace within, you're calming the world around you. In life, there will always be people we don't understand and actions we cannot accept. But instead of condemning, simply see, like a Zen master, watching the rain, not good, not bad, just rain. Like sunlight, even when hidden by clouds, it is still there. A judging mind sees only clouds. A compassionate mind sees the whole sky. And when your mind can hold both the clouds and the sun, that is the wisdom of Zen. You know, letting go of judgment can even help you sleep better. Judgments are noise in the mind. They keep the brain restless and the heart unsettled. When we release them, the mind lightens, the breath deepens, and the body naturally drifts into rest. Sleep researchers have found that people who cultivate gratitude and compassion generate theta brain waves, those that support deep restorative sleep. Those who dwell in judgment, however, remain in beta waves, the frequency of anxiety and alertness. Zen teaches that deep sleep doesn't begin with a warm blanket, it begins with a peaceful heart. So whenever you're about to criticize someone, pause for a moment. Take a slow breath and ask, "Am I mistaking the straw for the person?" Give others a little more space and give yourself the chance to be at peace. Then you'll realize the sunlight was shining all along, even when we turned away. Letting go of judgment doesn't mean ignoring what's wrong. It simply means not letting hatred blur our sight. When you see with a clear heart, you can still recognize mistakes, but without hating the person. You can still feel pain, but without needing revenge. You can still see suffering and understand that it too is part of learning. And in that understanding, compassion arises like sunlight filtering through straw, quietly warming places where flowers have yet to bloom. Now as night falls, let all the judgments of the day drift away like light clouds. Lie down, breathe deeply, and whisper, "I see the sunlight, even when it hides beneath the straw." Then close your eyes and let sleep come as a gentle blessing. For in that stillness, you return to the mind without judgment, the mind like the sky, vast and open, holding everything without clinging to anything. And when the light within you softens, we will continue our journey to another story, where we discover that sometimes the person we judge the most is ourselves. That afternoon in the Zen monastery, clouds drifted above the old tiled roofs, and the fading sunlight rested softly along the veranda. The scent of pine wood tea and incense from the evening meal mingled together in the air like a slow piece of music. The bell from the main hall rang long and deep, dissolving into the wind, blending with the faint rustle of dry leaves in the courtyard. Everything was still. Everything was calm, as if even time itself were sitting in meditation. Inside the meditation hall, the young monks sat around the table. They ate in silence, a practice not only to nourish the body, but to observe the mind. Here, even the sound of chopsticks touching bowls was treated as a Dharma talk, a reminder that mindfulness is present in the smallest of actions. That day, Zen Master Ryoju held a small meal to thank his disciples who had practiced with him for many years. The food was simple as always: white rice, boiled vegetables, steamed tofu, and seaweed soup. All were arranged neatly, releasing a soft fragrance of purity. But at the center of the table was one small plate, a dish someone in the kitchen had accidentally added a few slices of simmered fish placed beside the vegetables. The moment he saw it, a young monk named Izami frowned. He was known for his strict observance of the precepts, especially vegetarianism. Many admired him for his discipline. For years, he had never let a single grain of salt from meat touch his tongue. He saw that as proof of his purity. Unable to hide his displeasure, Izami lowered his head and said softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "Master, this dish is not vegetarian." The table fell silent. A few glances were exchanged, as if the stillness of the meal had been disturbed. The air felt heavier. Master Ryoju looked up, his eyes gentle yet deep, like a lake after rain. He gazed at Izami and asked quietly, "Did you taste it?" The question was so simple it startled him. Izami froze. He hadn't touched the dish at all. He had only seen it, but the question made something inside him tremble. The master said nothing more. He simply moved the fish to a smaller plate and set it aside. The afternoon light filtered through the window, reflecting softly off his chopsticks like moonlight on water. He spoke slowly, his voice calm and steady as a distant bell. We often see the faults of others because their flavor still lingers in us. The room grew silent again. The wind whispered through the roof tiles. Every sound seemed sharper. Several disciples lowered their heads, as if his words had touched something deep within them. Izami sat still. Inside him was a mixture of shame, surprise, and awakening. He realized that what had truly unsettled him was not the fish, but the thought, "I am purer than others." The master's words were like a mirror. He saw his own reflection, a man who believed his practice made him superior, yet was still trapped in the pride of purity. The light outside the veranda softened. The smell of simmered fish still lingered faintly in the air, but it no longer felt impure or offensive. It was just a smell, neutral, neither good nor bad. His mind, not the world, had been the one dividing things. The meal continued in silence. The sound of chopsticks striking bowls returned to what it had been, soft, even serene. But to Izami, everything now sounded different. Each breath, each sip of seaweed soup carried a new lesson. As long as the mind discriminates, the way remains incomplete. When the meal ended, Izami quietly gathered the bowls. The plate of fish sat untouched to the side, but within him something had been eaten, an invisible dish called humility. That night, as the wind drifted through the corridors, Izami sat, meditating alone. Moonlight shone on the cold stone floor, casting his shadow beside him. He remembered the master's question, "Did you taste it?" and smiled faintly. It was only then that he truly tasted not the flavor of fish, but the saltiness of his own judgment. From that day on, Isami was no longer so harsh with others. He still kept his vows, but with compassion, not pride. When he saw someone err, he simply bowed as if bowing to a part of himself. And whenever the breeze carried the faint scent of fish, during mealtime he remembered Master Ryoju, the teacher who had given him the greatest lesson of his life with just one small question. Did you taste it? The story may seem small, but it reflects the mirror of the human heart. Because when we see fault in another, it is often because we still carry its shadow within ourselves. If we had never felt anger, we couldn't recognize anger in others. If we had never known greed, we wouldn't be sensitive to greed in others. If we were completely pure, we would never need to condemn, because nothing in us would be touched. That is why the Buddha taught one who sees the faults of others has not yet seen their own mind clearly. Isami thought he was protecting the precepts, but in truth, he was reflecting the strictness within himself, the part that wanted to be right, clean, and superior. And Master Ryoju, through one simple question, showed him that judgment is the trace of the ego. In Zen, we do not speak of right or wrong, holy or worldly. We see causes and conditions. An action is simply a seed. Whether it grows into a flower or a weed depends on the soil of the mind. But people forget this. We look at others through the lens of our opinions, and it is that very lens that blinds us to truth. We see someone angry, but not their fear. We see someone boastful, but not their emptiness. We see someone breaking a rule, but not the pull of their past karma. Just like the fish on the table, Isami only saw not vegetarian, but not the heart of the one who cooked it. Perhaps it was an accident. Perhaps it was meant for a guest not used to temple food. Zen teaches, when you look at something, see the whole, not just the part that disturbs you. In psychology, this is called projection, casting one's own inner state onto others. When we judge, we are often speaking about ourselves. We are irritated not because of what's outside, but because something inside us resonates with it, something unresolved or unhealed. For example, a person who fears being lied to becomes hypersensitive to even the slightest dishonesty. A person once criticized for being inadequate often judges others harshly, trying to feel better. When we recognize this mechanism, we begin to let go. We understand that judging others is simply the mind's way of revealing its own unrest. Once an old Zen master asked a student, "Who do you find most unpleasant in the monastery?" The student replied, "The one who always boasts about his virtues." "Master." The master laughed. "Do you know why that bothers you? Because you too have the seed that wants to be praised. We are only disturbed by what we once were or still are. When we see that we stop blaming others and start looking within, that is the beginning of wisdom. Even in sleep, the mind reflects this truth. When we go to bed with judgment, the brain continues analyzing and reacting in dreams. But when we let go, the mind enters stillness, and sleep becomes true rest. Sleep researchers have found that judgmental minds produce strong beta waves, the waves of alertness and anxiety. Those who let go, who live with compassion, generate more alpha and theta waves, the rhythms of deep sleep and nervous restoration. In other words, those who release judgment sleep peacefully like people without debt. Letting go of judgment does not mean denying good and evil. It means seeing that both have a place in awakening. If we never made mistakes, how would we know what's right? If we never felt ignorance, how would we find wisdom? If we never strayed, how would we learn to return? Like the fish on the table, only through tasting the salt do we learn to appreciate the sweetness of vegetables. When we see another's fault without hatred, only understanding, we step closer to the Buddha's compassion. So if there is someone you still resent, ask yourself, what part of me are they reflecting? Perhaps they are only showing you the peace within that still longs to heal. Every person who enters our life is a living mirror. Those who make us happy teach us gratitude. Those who hurt us teach us self-reflection. No one is meaningless, only unseen deeply enough. Tonight before you sleep, try a small practice. Lie still, close your eyes, and bring to mind someone who has hurt or angered you. Then ask your heart, what am I projecting? You may realize that the person simply mirrors something you once feared, hid, or desired, but couldn't admit. Take a deep breath and whisper, I see the unrest within me, and I forgive it. When you forgive yourself, judgment toward others dissolves too, and sleep comes as a blessing, no longer heavy with the fish of the mind. The Buddha once said, when you see the fault in another, reflect. If it were not within you, you would not recognize it. This teaching isn't meant for self-blame, but as a reminder, everything we see is a mirror. The awakened one does not avoid mirrors, he simply sees himself clearly in them. Letting go of judgment is the first step toward freedom. Because when we no longer cling to how others should be, the mind stops being stretched between past and expectation. It returns to stillness, like a calm mirror that reflects without clinging. And in that mirror, you see everything clearly, yet are bound by nothing. That is living meditation Zen in every meal, in every word, in every gaze. Tonight, let every Isami within you, the part that wants to be right, pure, and judgmental, sit quietly beside Master Ryoju at the peaceful banquet of the heart. Do not divide which dish is pure or impure. Just taste the love that is present in the meal. Then, as you close your eyes, feel that gentle flavor spreading through your chest, not the taste of food, but the taste of letting go. For in the end, we do not need to be perfect beings. We only need to stop judging others and ourselves. Then you will see peace is not the absence of fault, but the absence of harshness toward fault. And when the mind grows still like water after a meal, we will move on to the next story, where light and shadow meet in the quiet image of a single lamp. That night, the mountain was so still, it seemed to be holding its breath. A crescent moon hung above the pines, its silver light spilling across the stones and stretching the shadow of a small hermitage nestled along the slope. The silence was deep, so deep that if one listened closely, they could almost hear the whisper of dew forming on the pine needles. In the distance, a stream murmured softly against the rocks like a slow-moving sutra recited by nature itself. Inside the small hut, Zen Master Jiko sat quietly before an old wooden table, his back straight, his breath steady like flowing water. Before him was a small oil lamp, its faint golden light touching his gentle face, tracing the fine wrinkles like lines in aged wood. Master Jiko had lived here for more than 30 years, far from any village with only the mountains and the moon for company. His life was simple beyond belief. One teapot, a few sutras, a worn robe, and that little lamp the only light in the deep night. But this night, that stillness was pierced by a soft sound. The wooden door creaked slightly. A shadow slipped through the threshold, silent yet carrying the hurried breath of fear. It was a thief. He crept step by step, the moonlight revealing his thin face and restless eyes. When he came near the table, he froze. Before him sat the old monk, unmoving, unafraid. Only the monk's eyes were open, clear as a lake reflecting the moon. The master's voice rose soft yet clear. "What is it you seek in this empty room?" The thief startled, his hand trembling around the small knife. I just want to take something. Anything." Master Jiko looked around. The room truly held nothing of value, no money, no treasures. Only the small lamp flickering on the table. He smiled gently, his voice kind as though welcoming a guest. "There's nothing here worth taking except that lamp. If you need it, take it." The thief hesitated, unsure whether the monk was mocking him or sincere. He looked at the lamp, its tiny flame casting warm light over the monk's thin hand. In that light, Jiko's face showed no trace of fear, only calmness so serene it unsettled the thief. He stepped forward and slowly picked up the lamp. The flame wavered, reflecting in his eyes, the weary eyes of a man who had wandered too long in the darkness of his own life. That small light seemed to reveal wounds he had long tried to hide. As he turned to leave, the master blew out the lamp. The flame vanished. The room fell into absolute darkness. Only the faint scent of burnt oil and the soft breath of wind outside remained. The thief froze. In that complete darkness, his heart pounded, not from fear, but from something he could not name. The master's voice rose again, deep and warm, as if echoing from far away. "Now you can take the real light." The thief stood still, his hands gripping the cold, lifeless lamp. It was now just an empty object, useless and dark. But inside him, another light flickered, small, fragile, yet enough to illuminate a place long buried under guilt and fear. After a while, he whispered, his voice trembling as if speaking to himself. "You just gave me the real light." Then he bowed deeply, set the lamp back on the table, and quietly stepped outside. The moon had risen high. Silver light covered the mountain slope, soft and pure. The thief's shadow grew smaller and smaller in the mist until it disappeared into the night. He left, but in his heart, he carried something he had never possessed before the light of awakening. Inside the hut, Master Jiko remained seated. No lamp, no thief. Only moonlight spilling through the veranda, touching his face, which now glowed not from the moon, but from the peace within. That night, though the lamp had gone out, another light had begun to burn, not in oil, not in flame, but in the heart of a man who had bowed before compassion. And the mountain returned to silence as if nothing had ever happened. That is the power of a mind free from fear and attachment. In the moment Master Jiko blew out the lamp, darkness did not simply fill the room. It illuminated the thief's true nature. Because only when we stand fully in darkness do we have the chance to see the light already within. In Zen, this is called self-nature light, the light that depends on nothing. External needs no candle, no flame. It is the light of awareness itself, never extinguished, only hidden beneath greed, fear, and ignorance. The thief came to take, yet he left having been given. And Master Jiko, who had nothing to lose, became the richest man that night. If you notice, many times in life, we are just like that thief. We wander searching for light in others, a word of approval, a hug, a compliment, a sign of success. We believe light exists out there, so the further we search, the more lost and exhausted we become. But true light is not found in taking. It is found in letting go. When Master Jiko blew out the lamp, he taught that no one can steal another's light, because light does not live in objects, it lives in awareness. In the same way, no one can take your peace unless you hand it to them. No one can take your clarity as long as you remain awake. In Buddhist scripture, there is an ancient verse, "My mind is the lamp. The wind of ignorance cannot blow it out. When darkness appears, remember the lamp still burns." When we suffer, we often try to light more lamps, seeking more people, more words, more pleasure outside ourselves. But sometimes only when the lamp goes out do we realize that darkness was never the enemy. It was the mirror that shows us where true light comes from. Modern psychology calls this illumination through loss. When a person is stripped of all outer supports, the brain begins to function differently. The prefrontal cortex, the center of deep awareness, becomes more active, helping us perceive truth with greater clarity. That's why many people only find peace after losing everything. When the outer lights fade, they are forced to turn inward and discover the one thing that cannot be taken, the light of consciousness itself. Have you ever felt like you're walking through darkness, your work falling apart, your relationship breaking down, your faith fading away? Perhaps at that very moment you're standing at the threshold of illumination. Like the thief that night, he didn't know that the act of stealing would become his return to the self. Every time life blows out your lamp, a failed plan, a lost person, a broken dream, don't be afraid. It might be someone teaching you that light no longer lives in your hands, but in your heart. Zen teaches, no one can take your light, you only forget it. Darkness is not an enemy, it is a reminder. It whispers, it's time to turn inward. Remember, even in the deepest night, the moon never disappears. The clouds are simply passing. So too with your heart, it has never lost its light, only been covered by dusts of fear and pain. If you're hearing these words before sleep, try a small practice. Close your eyes. Imagine a small lamp glowing in your chest. With each inhale, the lamp brightens. With each exhale, its light spreads through your whole body. Breathe deeply and slowly and feel this truth. No matter how dark the world becomes, there is a light within you that never goes out. That is Jiko's lamp. No one can steal it. The more you release fear, the brighter it glows. The more you stop judging, the clearer it becomes. Sleep scientists once said, a sense of safety is the biological lamp of the human being. When we believe we are safe, the body releases melatonin, the hormone that brings deep sleep. And there is no greater safety than knowing your inner light cannot be taken away. So tonight, instead of wishing for another lamp outside your door, whisper softly within, I already have the light inside me. Then, breathe gently. Each breath is a small candle linking with the next, forming a quiet stream of light flowing through the night. In the end, every person must pass through nights without a lamp, times when we lose direction, faith, or reason to go on. But if you can remember Master Jiko, the one who blew out his lamp only to awaken another's light, you'll understand. true light never dies. It only changes where it lives. When we dare to let go, light leaves the object and returns to the heart. When we stop fearing darkness, the darkness itself becomes the lamp. And in your sleep tonight, as every sound fades away, let your mind be like Jiko's room, empty, quiet, unresisting toward the dark. For only in that stillness can your inner light appear. It is the light that cannot be stolen, cannot be extinguished, and never needs to be proven. It is you, the original pure mind, untouched by dust. And when you open your eyes in the morning, remember, no one can steal your light, and no one can give it to you. Both have always been within you from the very beginning. Now that your heart is calm and the light within has found its place, let us continue to the next story where darkness once again tests the human heart, this time in the form of the mind deceiving itself. Night descended. The temple lay hidden among the mountains with only the sound of insects humming beneath a pale moon. Mist covered the brick courtyard in a thin veil like smoke, making everything appear dreamlike, as if drifting within a half-awake dream. The light in the meditation hall had just been extinguished. Only the wind moved through the rows of pines, carrying the chill and the scent of damp earth after rain. Everything was so still that it felt as if the entire temple were breathing slowly with the forest. A young novice named Nao was assigned to fetch water from the rear courtyard. The stone path leading to the well was soaked, and fallen leaves lay thick like a carpet. He carried a wooden bucket in his hand, walking slowly, the sound of his sandals brushing against the wet ground. The moon hung behind drifting clouds, its dim light barely enough to reveal vague shapes around the courtyard. Then suddenly thump, a soft sound echoed beneath his foot. Something soft and slick made Nao freeze. His heart pounded. In the faint moonlight, he bent down and saw on the ground a wet, round smear, slippery, spreading out like diluted blood mixed with rainwater. Nao whispered, "Oh no, did I just step on something alive?" The image of a frog carrying eggs flashed through his mind. His throat went dry. His hands trembled. He stepped back, staring at the spot, as a wave of guilt swelled painfully in his chest. Everything around him, the insects, the wind, vanished into silence. Only that thick, heavy stillness remained, and the feeling of guilt rising like a tide inside his ribs. That night, Nao could not sleep. In the darkness of his small meditation room, the image of the dead frog kept returning, so vivid he almost heard its final cry. He felt cruel. He repented, placing his palms together, praying for the tiny creature's soul to be released. But the more he prayed, the heavier his heart became. When the first light of dawn appeared, Nao went to find Master Soren, the elder monk he most revered. Kneeling before him, his voice trembled like someone confessing a sin. "Master, last night, I accidentally killed an innocent being. I couldn't sleep all night. My heart aches as if I've lost a part of my own life." Master Soren was silent for a while. The morning light fell on his face, half in shadow, half in gold. He asked gently, "Are you certain you killed it?" Nao answered without hesitation, "I saw it clearly, Master. Beneath my foot there was something wet, round, and soft. I think it was a frog carrying eggs." The Master nodded, his voice calm. "Good. Then take me there." The two walked to the back courtyard. The ground was still damp with dew. But now everything glowed clearly under the morning sun. When they reached the spot, Now pointed to Master Soren, bent down and slowly picked up a crushed eggplant. He smiled and placed it into Now's hand. "You have suffered over something that never happened." Now stood speechless, eyes wide, lips trembling. It was as if the whole world inside his mind had just collapsed. He looked at the eggplant, seeing every crack, every droplet of water seeping into its flesh, and realized that this was the dead frog he had imagined all night. A warmth spread through his chest. He looked up, whispering, his voice unsteady. "Master, the frog's death only happened in my mind." Master Soren nodded gently, his eyes kind yet deep. "That's right. Within the mind we can carry an entire world of suffering, even when nothing has truly happened. When the mind is covered by darkness, we mistake illusion for reality." Now bowed his head. A tear fell not from guilt, but from release. As the master turned to leave, he said softly over his shoulder, "Remember now, sometimes what hurts you most is not that you did wrong, but that you believed you did." Nao remained standing there, looking at the damp ground. Sunlight shone on the stain of guilt from the night before, now just a drying patch of water. Birdsong rose from the temple roof, bright and clear as a bell. He smiled faintly, gently placed the eggplant back on the earth, and pressed his palms together in gratitude. Inside him, a new space opened, not a space of loss, but of understanding that most of human suffering does not come from the outer world, but from stories that never truly happened inside the mind. The story seems simple, but it touches one of the deepest roots of human pain illusion. Now had not killed a frog at all, yet in his mind that frog died hundreds of times, killed by fear, imagination, and self-imposed guilt. And that is what we do every day. We fear losing someone who is still here. We punish ourselves for mistakes we only imagined. We grow angry over words never spoken. We cry for things that never occurred. We suffer not because of reality, but because of the mind. In Buddhist teaching, there is a term, delusive thought, meaning images and ideas that are unreal, yet to which we assign the weight of truth. They arise from the past or from fear of the future, and we believe them, hold them, and suffer for them. Now believed he had done wrong, and that belief became reality in his heart. But when the morning light revealed the eggplant, that truth dissolved like clouds dispersing before the sun. And when the clouds cleared, Now saw that the suffering of the previous night had never existed. The real danger is not the darkness, but the shapes our mind draws inside it. A faint sound outside a door can become an obsession. Someone's silence can turn into a deep wound. A blurred memory can transform into a lifelong verdict. All are eggplants in the dark, mistaken for frogs with eggs, keeping us awake all night because we are too afraid to light the lamp and look clearly. In modern psychology, this phenomenon is called catastrophizing, the habit of imagining worst-case scenarios. When anxious, the brain activates the amygdala, the danger center, creating exaggerated scenes to protect us. Yet, ironically, most of these disasters never happen. Researchers estimate that 85% of what we worry about will never come true, and in the remaining 15%, most outcomes are not as bad as we imagined. That means we live much of our lives inside self-created nightmares instead of the truth of the present moment. Zen teaches, if the mind does not chase after things, suffering has nowhere to cling. Now did not suffer. because he stepped on something, but because his mind clung to that image and fed it with imagination. The same happens to us, sleepless, anxious, fearful, though nothing is truly happening. The mind is simply making a film. And the more we watch, the more we believe it. The more we believe, the more real the suffering feels. To escape, we need only one thing: stop and look clearly. Just as when Master Soren asked Now to return to the spot, that act itself was lighting the lamp facing what he feared and seeing that the monster was only an eggplant. So in our lives, how can we stop suffering from our own eggplants in the night? First, practice pausing the moment your mind begins to imagine. Whenever you hear bad news, when someone goes silent, when your thoughts start weaving what if, take a deep breath, exhale, and whisper inwardly, "That may not be true." Then return to the present, the only place where illusion cannot live. When worry arises, touch your own hand, feel its warmth. When fear comes, listen to your breath, it still flows, meaning you are still alive. This body itself is a lamp, lighting the way out of imagination's darkness. In Zen, there is a practice called illuminating delusion. It teaches us to observe every thought that arises without labeling it as true or false. Just watch as clouds drift across the sky, no need to chase, no need to keep. Try it tonight before sleep. When thoughts appear, will tomorrow be okay? Are they upset with me? Don't push them away. Simply smile and whisper, "Hello, eggplants in the dark. I see you." That's all. You'll notice your mind softening, your breath slowing. Because once you see clearly, illusion loses its power. Sleep research confirms this. People who can observe without reacting have steadier nervous systems. Their brains produce more alpha waves, which naturally guide the body into deep rest. Meanwhile, those who ruminate on things not yet happened release cortisol, the stress hormone, causing restless sleep, rapid heartbeat, and unease. So every time you let go of a delusive thought, you are gifting yourself a peaceful night's rest. In the end, the lesson now learned is one we must all remember. Suffering needs no cause, only belief in what isn't real. The mind is like water. When stirred by illusions, wind waves of pain arise. But when we stop, the surface becomes still, and beneath it the moon remains whole. Tonight, if you find yourself anxious, remember Nao's story. Perhaps the frog carrying eggs in your life is only a wrong idea, a small misunderstanding, or something that hasn't happened at all. Light the lamp of awareness and see that everything is merely the shadow of your own mind. Breathe in, breathe out. No frog has died. Only you have come alive again here and now. And when the mind is still, the light within you returns like morning sunlight on the temple courtyard, clear and untouched by mist. Hold that clarity as we move together into the next story, where we'll see that all suffering, all delusion, and even awakening itself unfold only in this very moment. Morning in the temple. Dew still clings to the leaves and thin kitchen smoke drifts softly across the courtyard. The early chanting has just ended. Only the faint aroma of rice porridge remains, blending with the scent of fresh firewood burning. Wisps of smoke curl past the tiled roof, winding through the pale light of dawn. Everything moves slowly, quietly, as if even time itself were meditating with the temple. In one corner of the courtyard, the elder monk Ansi steps out from his meditation hall. He wears a dark brown robe, his gait calm and steady. The lines on his face are carved deep by time, yet his eyes remain bright and gentle like the surface of a still lake. For more than 30 years of secluded practice, Ansi has been regarded as the image of serenity. People in the nearby villages often say, "When you look into his eyes, all the storms inside you disappear." But that serenity is about to be tested not by misfortune, but by another human being. A few months earlier, the temple had welcomed a new abbot, Zen Master Jian. He bore none of the sternness typical of senior monks and rarely taught through long lectures. He simply observed quietly, spoke little, and worked with his own hands. His presence gave others the feeling that even the wind was listening to the breath of the leaves, that his stillness was not an emptiness, but a living stillness. One morning after the daily ritual, Ansei went to see Jian. They sat facing each other on the veranda with steam from a teapot rising between them. The sound of boiling water mingled with the distant rhythm of a broom sweeping the courtyard. Ansei spoke slowly, his voice deep like wind descending from the mountain. "I have attained stillness, like cold ashes. No joy, no sorrow. Nothing gained, nothing lost. Everything within me is completely silent." Jian listened quietly without interrupting. His eyes rested on the elder's face as if looking through each wrinkle, not to judge, but to listen. After a long pause, he smiled gently and said, "Ashes are still the remains of fire. When the wind rises, they can still fly." The short sentence sliced softly through the silence between them, like a blade wrapped in silk. For a moment, Ansei's smile froze. He said nothing, only lowered his gaze to the teacup steaming before him. That faint steam looked peaceful, but he realized a single breeze would make it vanish. The quiet was interrupted by the bubbling sound of the rice pot in the kitchen. The smell of smoke and slightly burnt grain drifted toward them, weaving into their conversation. Jian turned his head toward the courtyard. The cook, a young novice named Sada, was tending the fire. Sweat rolled down his forehead, but his expression remained calm. Jian called out, his voice warm and light, almost like he was asking himself, "Sada, what are you doing?" The young man looked up quickly, wiped his sweat, and answered, "I'm cooking, master." Jian nodded, his eyes soft as a passing breeze. "Good. When the mind is here, even in the heat of fire, it feels cool. That is Zen." The words rang like a small bell in Ansei's heart. He lifted his head, looking toward the kitchen smoke. Through the misty air, the sunlight streamed down in thin golden threads. He suddenly realized all these years he had only known how to be still within stillness, never still within movement. The ashes he took pride in still held the faint warmth of old fire. Just one gust, even the wind of a single sentence, was enough to scatter them. A real wind began to rise, carrying the scent of wood smoke and tea. For a brief moment, everything became one: the bubbling sound of porridge, the distant echo of a wooden gong, the warmth of the teapot on the table, and the spreading stillness inside Ansei's heart. There was no longer any boundary between meditation and life, between stillness and movement. Jian slowly poured more tea, his voice deep, yet gentle. Some people think Zen is sitting as still as a rock, but Zen is not stillness, it is clarity. When the mind is clear, you can stand amid smoke and fire and still feel cool, live amid noise and still hear the quiet within. Ansei bowed his head. A faint smile appeared on his lips, the smile of one who has just let go of something he thought he had mastered all his life. The wind blew again. Smoke rose in spirals. In that moment, he understood. Stillness is not the absence of movement, but knowing you are moving without being carried away. Amid the smell of smoke and the whisper of wind, something was kindled inside Ansei, not the flame of passion, but the light of awareness. And there, between smoke and fire, true meditation began. The story seems small, but it touches the essence of Zen. To live in the present moment, only this very moment. Elder Ansei believed that achieving stillness like ashes was the highest goal, but the stillness he reached was a fixed state, lifeless, unmoving. It was the stillness of death, not of life. Ashes can no longer burn, but Zen is the flame that keeps burning in mindfulness. Stillness is not extinction. It is the awareness of movement without being swept away. The cook Sada never spoke of Zen, never sought peace, never tried to name his practice. He was simply cooking. And in that simple doing, there was the complete presence of mind. No thought of yesterday, no worry for the noon meal, only breath blending with the smell of smoke, the crackle of wood, and the rhythm of his stirring hands. That is living Zen, not in a meditation hall, not in teachings, but in every small act of daily life. Many believe Zen means sitting motionless, eyes closed, detached from the world. But the Buddha taught meditation is not escaping life, but seeing life clearly in every breath. When washing dishes, just wash dishes. When eating, just eat. When walking, just walk. When sleeping, just sleep. The problem is, we rarely just do one thing. When eating, we think of work. When working, we think of dinner. When lying in bed, we think of tomorrow. So we have never truly lived a single moment completely. In Zen, this is called the delusion of time. It means the mind always runs ahead or lags behind, never resting where the body is. Just like Ansei, he achieved stillness in thought, but his mind still lived in the past, clinging to the idea, I have attained. Meanwhile, Sada had nothing to attain, nothing to prove. He was simply here now. And in that now, he met the Buddha, not through words, but through breath and fire. Zen Master Gaion said, "When the mind is here, even in fire, it feels cool." That statement wasn't just about meditation in the kitchen, it was about meditation in life itself, because life is full of fire, the fire of pressure, the fire of responsibility, the fire of hurt, anger, and desire. If we let the mind chase after them, we are burned. But when we dwell in mindfulness, we see that very fire as the energy that sustains us. Fire is no longer the enemy, it becomes the teacher. There is an interesting study from Harvard University people who practice being present even for just 20 minutes a day, show more stable brain activity, lower stress, and deeper sleep. When the mind stays in the present, the body naturally reduces the production of cortisol, the hormone of anxiety and fatigue. But when the mind races toward the past or future, the brain interprets it as danger, activating the fight or flight response. Heartbeat quickens, breath shortens, and rest becomes impossible. This means peace doesn't depend on circumstances. It depends on presence. You may have experienced such a moment without realizing it, when the scent of herbs while cooking suddenly calmed your heart, when warm water touched your skin in the shower and felt like comfort, when you watched a child sleeping and time seemed to stop. That is meditation. No need to strive for enlightenment, No need to attain. Just be here now. In the temple, the cook is often the one who meditates most deeply because each day he faces all elements at once: fire, sound, smell, taste, breath. If his mind wanders, the food burns. If his mind is steady, everything is just right. Likewise, life itself is one vast kitchen. If we are not present, things burn easily: our words, our actions, our emotions. But if we cook with mindfulness, even the smallest act becomes a ceremony of Zen. The Buddha once said, "One who truly lives in the present, even for a single day, is worth more than one who dreams for 100 years. For when we live fully in one moment, we touch the essence of life, impermanent, yet complete." The present doesn't last, but it is enough. It is the only door to true peace. When you go to sleep, your mind often drifts, replaying unfinished tasks, worrying about tomorrow. But rest only comes when you are here with this breath, this feeling. Like Sada the cook, not thinking of the next dish, not regretting the last, simply stirring the pot that's boiling now. Try this tonight. Before sleeping, place your hand on your chest. Take a deep breath. Feel your heartbeat. Feel the pillow, the air, the surrounding sound. Then whisper softly, "Only this moment." That phrase is like a key that brings you home to the true dwelling of the mind. When Ansi realized this, he laughed a soft, deep laugh. He understood that all those years seeking stillness, he had forgotten life itself. Meanwhile, Sada, amid heat and smoke, had found Zen right within the fire. That is the difference between the one who seeks stillness to escape and the one who finds stillness within movement. The first tries to avoid life. The second lives fully in life and remains free. And that is the way of Zen, not to seek a place without noise, but to find silence within noise. Not to wait for waves to stop before seeing the sea as calm, but to see the calm sea, even while the waves rise. When you realize that you no longer need to search for peace, you are peace. And when the mind rests in the present, when you have learned to breathe with the fire without fearing its heat, we shall move on to the next story, where a single drop of water teaches the great lesson of dissolution and selflessness. Late afternoon. As the sun prepared to set behind the mountain, its final light reflected upon the lake, calm as a mirror. Gentle breezes swept across, creating thin ripples that drifted outward, dissolved, and merged again. The world was so silent, one could hear leaves falling onto the surface of the water, and a lone bird's cry echoing through the valley. The whole scene felt like the long exhale of the earth before it entered its nightly rest. By the lake sat a young disciple named Kai, his eyes gazing into the distance. His face carried the heaviness of thought, as if his mind were trapped between two worlds, one of stillness he longed for, and the other of fear that he might lose himself completely. Since that morning's meditation, a strange unease had risen in him. He had sat in silence for hours, following his breath. Yet instead of peace, he felt a hollow emptiness spreading within. Inside that emptiness, a question echoed. If there is no self who is meditating, if I let go of everything, who is it that lives? When the sun disappeared behind the mountain, Kai went to find his teacher, Master Shunke, who had guided him for many years. The master sat on the veranda, where the evening light stretched long across the wooden wall, illuminating his face serene and clear as water. Kai knelt before him, his voice trembling softly. "Master, I'm afraid. I feel as though I'm losing myself. I no longer know who I am." Shunke didn't reply right away. He looked out toward the lake where the last traces of light shimmered on the surface like a mirror of stillness. After a long pause, he asked gently, his tone deep yet kind, "And what do you think you once were?" Kai remained silent, his mind filled with images of his former self, the person who once felt deeply, who feared, who rejoiced, who suffered, who thought of himself as a good man walking the spiritual path. But now that those things were fading, he no longer knew what remained. A vague fear spread through his chest. If there's no me, is there anyone left to live? The master continued to gaze at a small movement before them, a drop of water that had just fallen from the eaves into the lake. The droplet touched the surface, melted into it. No sound, no trace. Shunki asked softly, "Did you see that drop of water?" Kai nodded. The master continued, his voice so gentle it seemed to dissolve into the air. "Which drop is lost when it enters the sea?" Kai looked back at the lake. The faint ripples had vanished. Only the smooth surface remained, reflecting the glowing sky. A light breeze passed through, carrying the scent of fresh grass, making everything feel alive within the silence. In that instant, his teacher's words resonated inside him like a temple bell ringing through a quiet night. Which drop is lost when it enters the sea? Kai lifted his head slightly. His eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition of something obvious that he had long forgotten. "I am not lost. I only dropped the illusion of being separate." The master smiled. The wind blew, carrying with it the faint aroma of tea and the sound of a distant temple bell. Shunke said, his voice warm like the earth, "As long as you believe there is a self to protect, fear will follow you. But when you see that you are only a current within the great ocean of life, there is nothing to lose. The ocean never loses itself. Every drop is already it." Kai fell silent. All the questions in his mind dissolved like morning mist under sunlight. He looked at the lake, no longer seeing his reflection, only the sky itself. And strangely, in that not seeing, he felt larger, lighter, more real. For so long, he had believed enlightenment was a special state to attain. But now, as the day faded, he understood enlightenment is not becoming someone else. It is dissolving into what already is. On the surface of the lake, another drop of water fell, disappearing as quickly as breath. No beginning, no end. Only an unbroken flow of life where I and the world were never apart. In that moment, Kai understood what we fear losing was never truly there. The self we try to protect is only a stream of imagination shaped by memory, comparison, and desire. When we touch the truth of unity, that self dissolves like a drop merging with the sea. Many people fear no self, believing that losing the self means losing everything. But the Buddha taught only when we release the self do we truly possess all things. Just like a drop of water, when separate it is small and easily dried up. When merged with the ocean, it becomes infinite. I have met many people who ask, "How can I love without losing myself? How can I be in a relationship and still stay true to who I am? How can I let go without feeling empty?" The answer always begins where we misunderstand the self. We believe we are a separate drop with a name, a role, a boundary. But in truth, within every breath and every cell, we already contain the entire universe. Without the sun, we have no warmth. Without the earth, no body. Without our parents, no form. Without trees and plants, no breath. So who are we? We are everything, and also no one. When we still think of ourselves as separate, we live in fear of loss, loss of love, loss of work, loss of people, loss of reputation. That fear is what creates suffering. But when we see that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed like water that evaporates and returns as rain, we understand that no separation is ever permanent. A loved one who departs is not gone. A broken love is not gone. Even an unfulfilled dream is not gone, it merely changes shape, waiting for another moment to return. In Buddhism, this is called non-self-impermanence and interdependence, 3 doors that open to the same truth that we and all beings were never apart. I once saw a mother weeping at her child's altar saying, "My child is gone. I have nothing left." But later, when she began caring for orphans, she said, "I see my child in their eyes." In that moment, her tears were no longer bitter. She realized her child's drop had not vanished. It had merged into the great ocean of compassion. When we see ourselves as the ocean, we stop fearing the loss of a drop. When the heart grows, wide pain can no longer drown it, for suffering feels vast only when the mind is too small. In meditation, the self is like a closed room. Each belief, each judgment, each fear is a locked door. As we open them, letting go of prejudice, letting go of control, light begins to pour in. And when the light fills the house, leaving no shadow to hide, we realize the house and the light were never separate. Many people ask, if there is no self, then who is living? It's a good question, but in truth, life needs no one to live it. Life is already breathing through you, seeing through you, loving through you. You don't have to make life continue. It already does. The so-called I is just a tiny current within the vast river of existence. Once you understand that you no longer fear being carried away, because you are the river itself. Modern psychology has found something similar. Scientists measuring the brain activity of deep meditators discovered that the region responsible for the sense of self, known as the default mode network, becomes silent. When that region quiets, meditators describe the feeling of merging with everything, of no boundary between self and world. The result is a deep, unconditional peace, a state Zen calls no self, not losing yourself, but returning to all that is. Have you ever looked at a dewdrop on a leaf in the morning? It shines full and perfect, appearing separate. But when touched by a ray of sunlight, it disappears, not lost, but returned to the air, to the clouds, to the sky. And when the rain falls, it returns again. That is our nature. We are never gone, only returning to our true form. In daily life, we suffer most because of the illusion of separation. We think we are right and others are wrong. We think we are good and others bad. We think we are victims and others the cause of pain. But when we look deeply, we see that every action, every reaction is woven from the same thread: ignorance and the longing to be loved. No one is truly different. No one is ever fully apart. Thus, forgiveness is not superiority. It is recognition. And compassion is not charity. It is seeing yourself in the other. In Zen, people say, there is no one to forgive and no one to blame, Because when we see clearly, all is one vast ocean of causes and conditions. If someone hurts you, it may be because they are wounded even more deeply. If someone leaves you, it may be because they are searching for their own way home. When you understand this, your heart opens. There is no resentment, only compassion. That evening, Kai returned to the lake. He sat quietly, watching the moon reflected on the surface. He no longer asked, "Who am I?" He no longer tried to come back. He simply sat breathing with the wind, watching the moon dissolve on the rippling water. He understood that within each wave was the drop named Kai, no longer separate, no longer alone, but never lost. When you go to sleep tonight, remember this: you don't need to find yourself. You only need to stop believing you were ever lost. Everything you need is already within you, like water in the ocean, like light in the dawn. Before you close your eyes, take a deep breath and whisper, "Nothing is apart from me. I am the flow that breathes." That simple phrase is the deepest sedative for the soul. When the mind has no boundaries, sleep becomes light as a cloud. When we stop trying to be a drop, the ocean finds us. And so as Kai dissolved into the stillness of the sea, the final question in his heart faded away. There was no longer self or other, only one stream of light flowing through all things. In the next story, we will meet another Zen master, Hakuin, who taught the great lesson of equanimity amid praise and blame. The story is that so may sound simple, but it holds the entire art of living, unmoved by the waves of the world. Let us listen together. Morning in the small village. Mist still lingered on the old tiled roofs. The temple bell rang through the still air, blending with the distant crow of roosters and the laughter of children playing in the alley. Everything seemed peaceful, as if storms had never touched this world. But sometimes just one rumor, like a pebble tossed into a calm lake, is enough to stir countless ripples. That day, the whole village was in an uproar. People whispered, pointed fingers, gossiped. By the time the sun was high, a crowd had gathered at the temple gate, driven by anger, curiosity, and the comfort of believing they were on the side of righteousness. They surrounded Zen Master Hakuin, the teacher renowned throughout the region for his wisdom and compassion. Amid the noise, a man stepped forward, pointed at him, and shouted sharply, You are the father of the child that girl from our village gave birth to." A silence fell. All eyes turned toward Hakuin, who stood on the veranda, broom still in hand, as if he were listening to a story that had nothing to do with him. No anger, no denial, only calm. He bowed slightly and said in a voice soft as a passing breeze, "Is that so?" That answer made the crowd even louder. His silence unsettled them. They mistook it for confession. Their anger spread like fire. They wanted to see him lose his temper, to hear him defend himself, to force a reaction. But he remained quiet. That afternoon, they brought the baby to him, a tiny body wrapped in a thin cloth. They placed the child at the temple gate and said coldly, "If you did this, then take responsibility for it." Hakuin bent down, looking at the infant's weak cries. He gently lifted the baby into his arms and said only, "Is that so?" No protest, no blame. Just a short sentence, but within it were acceptance, letting go, and compassion. From that day on, the small temple had one more sound, the cry of a child. Each morning, people saw Hakuin still chanting sutras, still sweeping leaves, still working as before, except now he carried a baby in his arms. He fed the child goat's milk, lulled it to sleep with the sound of the wooden bell and the rhythm of his prayers. At night, when the wind passed through the veranda, villagers could see a faint light still glowing in his hut, where he sat meditating with the baby asleep on his lap. No complaints, no resentment, only silence and warmth. A year passed. The villagers slowly forgot the old story. They remembered only the image of the old master smiling gently as he carried the child to the well each morning to wash its face. Then, one day, the young woman, the one who had accused him, appeared at the temple gate. Her face was pale and thin, her eyes red with tears. She knelt down, trembling her voice. Breaking, "I'm so sorry. You are not the child's father. I was forced to lie. Please forgive me, and allow me to take my baby back." The air grew still. The morning wind passed through the robes, carrying the faint scent of chrysanthemums blooming in the yard. Hakuin remained seated, holding the child in his arms. He looked at the woman, bowing in tears. Then, in a voice light as a dissolving cloud, he said, "Is that so?" The woman burst into sobs, her hands shaking as she received the child. Hakuin handed the baby to her and added softly, "I only did what life placed in my hands. No bitterness, no teaching, just an ordinary statement, but within it lay an ocean of wisdom and compassion." When the woman left, Hakuin watched her go. The morning sun touched his face, making his expression radiant and peaceful. Then he turned back, picked up his broom, and continued sweeping the courtyard, as if nothing had ever happened. From then on, the villagers told this story again and again, not as gossip, but as a teaching. They said, "Some people try to prove they are right, but others choose silence so that truth can reveal itself." And in that small temple under the old pine tree, the sound of Hakuin's broom continued to sweep steady and gentle, like the sound of a peaceful mind amid praise and blame. At first glance, this story seems simple, but it is a masterpiece of Zen, a symbol of the mind unmoved by praise or blame, right or wrong, love or hate. Hakuin was not indifferent. He understood the pain of false accusation. He knew what it felt like to lose honor and the trust of others. But he did not let that understanding become attachment, because he knew if the mind moves with praise, it will also suffer with blame. If the mind needs to be understood, it will be wounded when misunderstood. Only when the mind no longer needs to justify itself can one be truly free. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, "As a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise remain unmoved by praise or blame. Praise and blame both are winds. If our mind is a weak flame, even a small breeze can extinguish it. But if our mind is the flame of mindfulness, even the storm only makes its light dance brighter." Hakuin never tried to prove his innocence because truth needs no defense. Only what is false requires vindication. Truth, like the sun, shines even when hidden by clouds. And how often do we waver because of praise and criticism? A single compliment can lift us for a day. A careless insult can keep us awake all night. We live like puppets pulled by the strings of others' words, lifted when praised, crushed when blamed. Why? Because we have not yet learned to rest within ourselves. Someone once asked an old Zen master, How can I avoid being hurt when I'm misunderstood? The master replied, when you no longer need to be understood. That is not indifference. It is the wisdom of letting go. When we see clearly, those who misunderstand us are also trapped in ignorance. They suffer just as we do. Instead of resentment, we can feel compassion, for they have not yet seen the light we see. Like Hakuin, he did not grow angry at the young woman because he knew she too was a victim of fear and pressure. Those who cause us pain are often those who have never learned how not to suffer, and those who see deeply no longer need to retaliate. Equanimity between praise and blame is not coldness, it is clarity about the nature of words. Every compliment, every insult is just a sound passing through the air. It gains power only when we take it into our hearts, chewing it over and over in our minds. If we let it pass, it fades like wind through leaves. If we hold it, it becomes a blade that cuts our own heart. Modern science has discovered something remarkable. The human brain reacts to criticism almost the same way it reacts to physical pain. That's why we truly feel hurt when insulted. But that also means we can train the mind not to hurt. Meditation is that medicine. When we observe feelings without reacting, the brain begins to relearn. It stops triggering defense mechanisms. It no longer treats criticism as danger. Then emotions arise, are seen, and dissolve. At night, if you lie awake because someone misunderstood, you remember Hakuin's words. Is that so? It is not indifference. It is returning everything to its rightful place. No holding, no resisting, no reaction. When someone praises you, smile and say, "Is that so?" When someone criticizes you, smile again. Is that so? Not because you don't care, but because you know the nature of words is impermanent. People come and go like clouds. Reputation comes and goes like the wind. Only inner peace remains. When Hakuin held the baby, he never thought he was suffering injustice. He simply saw a being in need of love. When he gave the baby back, he didn't feel vindicated. He simply saw that the karma had come full circle. That is the heart of a bodhisattva, acting without seeking credit, enduring without needing defense. Like the rain that falls, it does not choose where to land. It only refreshes all that lives. Many people carry into their sleep the bitterness and injustice of the day. The words, the looks, the misunderstandings replay endlessly in their minds like a whirlpool that never stops. But you can try Hakuin's way. Before you sleep, take a deep breath and whisper, "Is that so?" Those 2 words are enough to set down the weight of the day. They do not erase memory, but they erase attachment. They do not make you forget, but they end resistance. And when resistance ends, the body heals and sleep deepens naturally. The person who remains calm amid praise and blame is not one who never gets hurt, but one who no longer lets pain control their life. They know that no matter what is said, the sun still rises, the wind still blows, and peace is still possible within. If you can practice this every day, when someone praises you, smile, feel grateful, and let it go. When someone criticizes you, smile, thank them, and let it go. Keep neither praise nor blame. Keep only clarity. That is the art of living in the world without being carried away by it. And when you can say, "Is that so?" to every storm, you'll realize something extraordinary. No one can take away your peace unless you allow them to. No word can wound you unless you believe it's true. No event can extinguish you unless you forget you are the light itself. Then your mind becomes like a lake, no longer fearing the wind, nor needing to be still. For waves and water were never separate. Praise and blame coming and going, all are but breezes passing over the surface of the heart. When Hakuin closed the temple gate at the end of the day, he didn't need to explain himself to the world, nor reclaim his reputation. In that moment, he attained something greater than honor, inner freedom. And that is our lesson today. Peace of mind does not come when the world grows quiet, it comes when we stop reacting. Not when the waves calm, but when we see that waves are water. Now as you breathe in and out, let your mind become like Hakuin's calm, clear, unattached. The world may praise or blame you, but you simply smile and whisper, "Is that so?" And when your mind has found its stillness, we move on to the next story, where a broom and a rainfall will teach us the true meaning of impermanence, that nothing is ever lost, only transformed breath by breath within the present moment. Let us continue to listen. That afternoon, rain began to fall from the heavy clouds behind the mountain. The steady sound of water hitting the roof tiles blended with the wind, and the distant chorus of insects forming a somber melody of heaven and earth. The old temple was shrouded in damp gray, as if the world itself were sighing. Golden pine needles dropped from the ancient trees, spiraling in the wind before gathering in small piles on the moss-covered courtyard. In the midst of the rain, a young novice named Rin was bent over sweeping the courtyard. His brown robe was darkened by water, clinging tightly to his thin back. With every stroke of the broom, he put in all his effort, as if he wanted to sweep away not only the fallen leaves, but also the endless rain itself. Yet every time he cleared one section, the wind would rise again, scattering more leaves, spreading puddles everywhere. Abbot Choen, who had lived more than half his life in this temple, stopped as he passed along the veranda. He looked at Rin, the small figure struggling against the force of nature, and smiled gently. The rain tapping on the roof sounded like the slow ticking of time between master and disciple. His voice came deep and calm, like a distant bell. "Rin, what are you doing?" The boy looked up, breathing hard but resolute. "I want to make the courtyard clean, master." Choen gazed out at the rain-soaked yard, where the wind kept scattering the freshly swept leaves. He asked softly, still with kindness in his tone, "The rain wants to fall. You want it clean. Who will win?" The question landed in the air like a drop of water falling into a still pond. Rin stood silent. His small hands still gripped the broom but no longer moved. His eyes followed the streams of rainwater washing away the traces of his labor. Something inside him began to flow like the leaves, a feeling both sad and light. Choen stepped out from under the veranda. Rain drummed on his dark robe, but he didn't shield himself. He stood calmly beside the boy, looking out over the courtyard, and spoke slowly. "Keep sweeping, but don't fight the rain." Rin looked up. Raindrops fell across his young face, mixing with his quiet breath. He stared at his teacher for a long time, trying to grasp the meaning. The rain still fell, the leaves still fell, but something within him stopped. Not his hands, but his need to win. The master said nothing more. He only smiled, then picked up another broom and began sweeping beside the novice. one old, one young, quietly doing what seemed pointless, sweeping leaves the wind would bring again. Yet something had changed. It was no longer a battle between man and rain. It was harmony. The sound of broom strokes blended with the rain, creating a slow rhythm like the earth breathing. Rin felt the chill of water on his skin, the scent of damp moss in his nose, and realized the courtyard can never stay clean, just as life can never be without storms, but the heart can be still amidst what is not still. Choen set his broom down and said softly, just loud enough for the wind to hear, "When you want something that goes against nature, you grow tired. But when you make peace with nature, you see that everything is helping you understand yourself." Rin looked at his teacher, and in his eyes shone something brighter than the lightning outside. He bowed and continued sweeping, but now not to make the courtyard clean, only to sweep to understand the rain, to understand the wind, to understand his own heart. The rain continued without pause. But in that rain, a child had stopped fighting the world. And there, in the leaf-strewn courtyard, Zen had begun. That simple story carries within it the essence of impermanence, a truth most of us spend a lifetime trying to learn. Because in a way, all of us are sweeping leaves in the rain. We want life to be clean, orderly, and calm. But life, like rain, keeps falling in its own way. People come and go. Happiness rises and fades. Everything we try to hold slips through our fingers, and we suffer because we believe we can control the rain. Rin only wanted a clean courtyard, but what made him suffer was not the leaves, it was his desire to fight nature. Just as our suffering comes not from change, but from refusing to accept that everything changes, that is the timeless human disease resisting impermanence. We fear that those we love will change. We fear our health will fade. We fear youth slipping away. We fear that today's joy will turn into tomorrow's sorrow. But Master Choen reminded gently, keep sweeping, but don't fight the rain. It is not surrender. It is the wisdom of giving your best in the present moment without trying to make the world stand still. In the scriptures, the Buddha taught, all conditioned things are impermanent. To see impermanence is to see truth. It sounds simple, but to live it, one must endure many seasons of rain as Rin did, because the human heart loves to cling. We cling to people to work to the idea of who we think we are and who we must be, and that clinging exhausts us. We keep sweeping while the rain of life keeps falling, not stopping for anyone. Once a woman who had lost her husband said to a Zen master, "I can't bear how quickly everything disappears. Yesterday, he was here. Tonight, only an empty chair." The master asked, "If you could stop the rain, could you keep the sky blue forever?" She said nothing. He continued, "The rain is not wrong, and neither is your grief. But don't try to sweep it away by forcing yourself to forget. Keep sweeping, meaning keep living, keep working, keep breathing, but don't fight the rain. Let the tears fall. Let impermanence pass through you without hating it." The woman bowed and wept, but for the first time, her tears felt light. Understanding impermanence does not make us cold. On the contrary, it makes us cherish every moment more deeply. When we know leaves will fall, we love each green leaf. When we know people will leave, we treasure each glance. When we know the body will age, we care for each breath. Impermanence doesn't steal happiness, it shows us where happiness truly lives. Those who don't understand impermanence live trapped in the illusion of control. Those who do understand live in inner freedom, because they no longer need the world to obey their will. They simply flow with it, like the one who sweeps in the rain, still acting, but without strain. Still engaging, but not clinging. Still loving, but not fearing loss. Someone once asked a Zen master, "If everything is impermanent, what is the meaning of effort?" The master smiled, "Because life changes, we must make effort. If life were unchanging, nothing would need to be done. It is change that gives our actions power to create new causes and conditions. We act but with awareness, not fear. Sweeping the courtyard is action. Fighting the rain is attachment. One brings peace, the other suffering." Modern psychology has a name for this human habit of resisting impermanence. It is called resistance, bias, the brain's tendency to deny change in order to feel safe. When we lose someone, the brain tries to act as if nothing happened, but that only prolongs the pain. When we accept change, the brain stops resisting and healing begins. Mindfulness is the oldest practice that makes this possible. When we inhale, exhale, and watch emotions come and go, we teach the brain, change is not dangerous. Everything is simply flowing. Each night before you sleep, if you feel weary, because life hasn't gone your way, remember the image of young Rin. He kept sweeping even as the rain fell. He didn't let the world make him drop the broom, nor did he forget that the rain had its right to fall. You can try a small habit. Before closing your eyes, whisper softly, "I accept today with both its rain and its leaves." That alone will calm the mind. Sleep will come gently like the sound of rain outside the eaves. In life, we cannot choose whether it's sunny or raining, but we can choose how we sweep the courtyard. If we act to control, we suffer. If we act to harmonize, we discover that even in the rain, there is light. Just as Master Choen said, not telling Rin to stop sweeping, only teaching keep sweeping, but don't fight the rain. A single sentence enough for a lifetime of meditation. Impermanence is not a tragedy. It is the breath of life itself. Without impermanence, flowers would never bloom. Without impermanence, pain could never heal. Without impermanence, we would remain trapped in our old sorrows. Because of impermanence, wounds can close. Because of impermanence, the mistaken can become kind. Because of impermanence, every dark night can find its dawn. So when life changes, don't ask. Why? Ask instead, am I resisting what is if? So let go, not to give up, but to begin seeing clearly. Like the one sweeping the courtyard, not hoping the rain will stop, but realizing that each sweep itself is meditation, acceptance, and harmony. And perhaps that is the secret to living peacefully in a world that never stops moving. Don't seek peace in stillness. Find peace within movement. Don't wait for the rain to end before being happy. Find joy in the sound of the falling rain. When Rin grew up, whenever he saw the rain, he no longer frowned. He simply smiled, held his broom firmly, and began to sweep. The leaves still fell. The rain still came. But in his heart, there was no longer winner or loser, only life unfolding completely. And so when the heart has understood impermanence, when the hands can sweep without resenting the rain, we move on to another story, where a ghostly mosquito net will reveal this truth. When the mind is bright, even shadows dissolve, and wisdom can transform what once seemed most frightening. Let us continue this journey together. The night in the temple was utterly still. The full moon stretched across the sky so bright that each stone on the path could be seen clearly. Its silver light covered the mossy roof tiles, the bamboo leaves by the veranda, and the small pond where faint ripples reflected the moon's shadow. A soft breeze stirred, brushing against the thin leaves and creating a sound like the earth's own breath, gentle, steady, and profoundly deep. At the far end of the garden inside, a simple wooden room scented with old timber and incense, Zen Master Sengai sat in meditation alone. The room held almost nothing, just a bamboo bed, a wooden table, a few sutras, and a thin mosquito net. But strangely, for 3 nights in a row, that net kept disappearing. Each morning when Sengai awoke, the net was gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no strange noises, and no one in the temple knew what had happened. The young monks whispered among themselves, "Maybe it's a thief, or perhaps the mosquito spirits took it. Maybe someone's playing a prank on the master." But Sengai only smiled, a kind, inscrutable smile. He asked no questions, showed no anger, and looked for no culprit. At night, he still meditated as usual, listening to the wind and the scent of the night, as if nothing had occurred. Then came the 4th night. The moon was as bright as a polished mirror over the temple. Sengai sat at his old wooden table, dipped his brush into ink, and began to paint. No one knew what he was doing. His hand moved slowly and steadily, as though writing a verse upon the moonlight itself. He painted a white skull, its hollow eyes deep and empty, its teeth bared in silence. Above the skull, he drew streaks of lightning zigzagging across the darkness as if tearing through the night. When he finished, he blew gently to dry the ink, then hung the painting on the mosquito net, exactly where it had always been. Afterward, he extinguished the lamp, returned to his bed, and sat quietly in the dark, his breath steady as the rhythm of waves. Outside, the moon shone on. The night was so still that even the sound of a falling leaf could be heard. Then a faint sound. The door creaked open. Soft, cautious footsteps moved through the shadows. A figure slipped inside, hunched and trembling, breathing hard. The thief crept toward the bed, hand shaking as he reached for the mosquito net, and at that instant, a scream shattered the silence. It echoed through the entire temple, bouncing off every roof tile and wall before dissolving into the night like a bell dropped into a well. The young monks bolted awake, grabbed torches and ran, but by the time they arrived, the thief had fled, face pale as ash legs, quivering eyes wild with terror, as though he had glimpsed the very gates of hell. The mosquito net remained. Under the moonlight, Sengai's skull painting glowed, its empty eyes staring straight into the heart of whoever dared to look. The next morning, as a light drizzle fell, a young monk timidly asked, "Master, why didn't you catch him, or punish him to make him remember his lesson?" Sengai was brewing tea, his movements slow as if conversing with each drop of water. He smiled gently, poured the tea, and replied softly, "I did not strike him. I only borrowed fear to awaken fear." The young monk looked puzzled. Sengai turned toward the rain outside, washing the dust from the bamboo leaves, and added his voice as light as the wind through the forest. "Some are haunted by darkness because they fear it. Some see light and still fear it. The only way for them to stop running is to see themselves within that fear. That night, villagers whispered of a thief who had dared enter the temple. But after meeting the ghost of the moon, he renounced stealing and went to the mountains to become a monk. No one knew if it was true, but from that night onward, nothing in Sengai's temple was ever stolen again. And so people said, some lessons need no punishment, only a mirror that helps one see oneself clearly. That simple saying carries profound Zen wisdom. Sengai knew that darkness cannot be transformed by violence, it only breeds more fear. But the light of wisdom, even if awakened by a startling image, can help one lost in fear recognize their own delusion. What we call a thief is merely an ignorant mind seeking a misguided escape. If we respond with anger, that mind only sinks deeper into darkness. But if we shine light upon it, not through judgment, but through awareness, then that light itself allows the person to see. That night, the thief was not punished, he was awakened, not by the lash, but by his own reflection within fear. In Buddhist teaching, this is the principle of transformative wisdom prajna. The wise do not destroy darkness, they illuminate it. They do not subdue with force, they dissolve ignorance through insight. It is like when you lie awake at night, surrounded by thick darkness, your mind crowded with worries, memories, and fear. The more you fight them, the stronger they become. But if you light a small lamp or simply open your inner eyes with mindfulness, you see that darkness was never real. It was only the space where light had not yet reached. This is how Master Sengai borrowed fear to awaken fear. He did not destroy. It was his awareness that illuminated. We often forget that within our own hearts there is also a thief. It doesn't steal nets, it steals peace. It comes disguised as worry, regret, anger, or self-blame. Each night when you try to sleep, it quietly opens the door and takes your rest away. And like the thief, we react by fighting, fleeing, or pretending not to notice. But the more we resist, the stronger it grows. The harder we push it away, the more it clings. What Master Sengai did, and what you can learn, is to look directly at fear with the light of awareness. When his net was stolen, he didn't ask, "Who did this?" He asked, "Why has fear appeared?" When hurt, a practitioner does not ask, "Who caused my pain?" They ask, "Which part of me is still unseen?" When old thoughts rise in the night, memories, mistakes, or faces you wish to forget, you can try to chase them away, or you can sit quietly, smile, and watch them drift by like clouds. That is wisdom. True light never fights darkness, it simply appears. Sengai did not just protect his net. He taught his students the meaning of fearlessness, a vital quality in Zen. For when the heart fears, clarity fades. When clarity fades, every action becomes reaction. But when wisdom shines, every action becomes transformation. Notice he did not use authority nor moral lectures to teach. He used the image of fear itself to help another see within. That is compassion born of wisdom, not to strike, not to punish, but to help awaken from ignorance. In modern psychology, this is called mirroring the fear. When we face what we fear, its power dissolves. Like when you were a child afraid of the dark until you turned on the light and realized the monster was only a coat on a chair. Zen works the same way. Fear only seems powerful when we believe it's real. When mindfulness shines upon it, we see. There is no monster outside me, only a part of myself that has not yet been seen. If you are hearing these words late at night, try this. close your eyes, breathe deeply, and imagine all your worries, everything that keeps you awake as faint, shadowy figures around you. Do not fight. Do not chase. Do not erase. Simply light a small lamp within the lamp of awareness, and soon you will see the shadows fade. Not because you did anything, but because the light has returned. That is the meaning of transformative wisdom. In Buddhism, transformation does not come from grand acts, but from a single moment of seeing clearly. When you look with a still heart, every fear becomes only an echo. When you look with awakened wisdom, every thief within you becomes a companion on the path. When Master Sengai painted the skull and lightning, it was not to frighten, but to illuminate ignorance, both in the thief and in himself. Even within the enlightened darkness remains to be seen, and only the light of understanding can free both. The next night, he hung the same net again. No one dared touch it yet. He never took it down. He left it there as a symbol of wisdom's light. Sometimes when the wind blew, the skull's shadow flickered on the wall, but to him it was only the shadow of light itself. He smiled, closed his eyes, and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. Your life is no different. You need not remove every dark shadow in your mind, only light the lamp of awareness. When wisdom shines, fear dissolves. When the heart is still, what once threatened you becomes your teacher. For sometimes, fear itself is the teacher of awakening. Without it, you would never know how long you had forgotten the light. And so tonight's lesson is not about the net or the thief. It is about how we face darkness. Sengai did not preach the Dharma. He lived it through simple actions, borrowing fear to awaken fear, using form to illuminate the mind. That is meditation in action, compassion guided by wisdom. When you lay your head upon the pillow tonight, let your mind be lit by awareness. Do not try to silence your thoughts. Simply watch them drift by like clouds across the night sky. Then you will realize when the light within you is still, the darkness outside has nothing to threaten. For as the Buddha taught, no one can extinguish darkness with darkness. Only light can do that. We end here with the lesson of the Zen master who painted skull and lightning, the man who taught that true light never fights. It simply appears, and when your heart shines, every shadow disappears. Thus ends our journey through these ancient Zen tales, though the light continues in every breath, in every quiet sleep. For awakened wisdom does not only dispel the darkness of night, it also opens the dawn within you. As our time together tonight comes to a close, take a moment to notice something subtle, yet real, has changed within you. Perhaps a thought has softened, a fear has faded, or your breath has simply grown slower and deeper. These transformations did not come from outside. They came from you, the one who allowed yourself to pause, listen, and open. The peace you feel tonight is not some distant gift of Zen. It has always been here, waiting in the moments you stop trying to control and simply allow yourself to be. As a Zen master once said, when we stop trying to still the water reflects the sky by itself. That effortless allowing, the letting go, the acceptance, is what brings you home to your natural quiet. These stories tonight were not meant to be remembered, but to be felt. To feel the ease of not needing to be right, the relief of not needing to understand, and the freedom of no longer needing to prove anything to life. Your heart has traveled a journey from movement to stillness, from thought to clarity. And now, as sleep draws near, let the wisdom planted within you become a soft pillow, and the silence you've touched become a gentle blanket for your breath. Do not try to hold on to anything. Let your body melt into the tender darkness, like incense smoke dissolving into space, not lost, just returning home. If someday your mind grows restless again, remember, peace never left you. It only waits for you to stop searching and come home. You can return here anytime you wish to these stories, these breaths, this quiet space within yourself. Thank you for sharing this night with us and for allowing these stories to touch your heart. If you feel nourished, please subscribe to Buddhism Seeds. Share this video and leave a comment about the smallest thing you felt while listening. Every word you share becomes a seed of goodness sent into the world. May you have a peaceful night. Sleep deeply. Sleep gently. And when you awaken, carry this quiet light into the new morning. For wherever there is mindfulness, there is peace.